Chapter 1505. In midair, Chen Wuqing's figure flickered and disappeared into the glazed devil pagoda. From outside the pagoda, one could no longer see Chen Wuqing's figure. They could only see a flickering light dot moving. Nie Tian looked at the glazed devil pagoda, but he wasn't in a hurry. Since there were only 3 of them, there was no need to fight over it. He wanted to see what kind of power the glazed devil chi had that could enhance a cultivator's martial physique. A cultivator's martial physique was not only related to a cultivator's strength, but it was also related to a cultivator's martial talent. Under the same level of strength, a person with a stronger martial talent would have a stronger martial physique. Enhancing the martial physique was equivalent to indirectly enhancing a cultivator's talent. The others weren't in a hurry when they saw Chen Wuqing taking the lead. They wanted to see what floor Chen Wuqing could reach with his talent. This kid is a cultivator with innate godhead. His talent is top-notch. He might have a chance to reach the 5th floor. Xueman Huang smiled faintly. With his strength, he could tell that Chen Wuqing was a cultivator with innate godhead at a glance. He was a little surprised that there was a cultivator with innate godhead among the 6 chiefs. Yang Wu nodded solemnly. He knew how terrifying an innate godhead was. Moreover, Chen Wuqing's talent was naturally very high since he could become a low-rank god champion. Although the 5th floor wasn't high, it was already very terrifying. He reached the 2nd floor. While the 2 were talking, the light dot in the glazed devil pagoda had reached the 2nd floor. Based on his speed, he has a high chance of reaching the 5th floor. Yang Wu's eyes flickered. Chen Wuqing's speed of entering the 2nd floor exceeded his expectations. The glazed devil pagoda was very strange. The stronger a cultivator's talent, the smaller the pressure they felt, and the faster they could reach the next floor. Chen Wuqing's speed was very fast, and it was very likely that he could reach the 5th floor. Those who could reach the 5th floor were all monstrous geniuses. At this time, the others couldn't hold back anymore. They moved and entered the glazed devil pagoda in a flash. Big brother Nie Tian, I'm going too. Ed walked to Nie Tian's side and chuckled. Be careful. Nie Tian nodded. He believed that with Ed's strength and talent, he should be able to enter the 5th level and above. 2 glazed demon pagodas were provided to the 3 celestial emperor leaders and the 3 lesser god leaders. Ed nodded with a smile and entered the smaller glazed demon pagoda. Chen Wuqing had already reached the 3rd floor, and Gongsun Baoyue, the leader of the lesser god chiefs of the spirit god domain, had also entered the demon tower and quickly reached the 2nd floor. Nie Tian noticed that Gongsun Baoyue's speed of entering the 2nd level was much slower than Chen Wuqing's. Little friend Nie Tian, aren't you going in? Yang Wu looked at Nie Tian. He wanted to see who would be faster, Nie Tian or Chen Wuqing. All right. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. He turned around and spoke to Emo Rushi and the others. Then, he moved and came to the air. However, he didn't enter directly. Instead, he slowly felt the glaze halo in the air. What a mysterious power! Being in this halo, all the meridians in my body open up. It seems like my whole body has become active. Nie Tian looked at the glazed devil pagoda in front of him and murmured in his heart. Nie Tian. Then, he moved and wanted to enter the glazed devil pagoda. However, at this time, Indra's voice suddenly sounded. What's wrong? Nie Tian's body stopped and he couldn't help but be stunned. Nie Tian, this glazed chi is a bit strange. It has a great effect on the power in a cultivator's body. If you enter the demon pagoda, I'm afraid there will be an accident, Indra said solemnly. Deshir Tian said in a deep voice. His soul shadow appeared in his sea of consciousness and carefully felt the glaze halo. His expression was actually very worried. Nie Tian frowned and immediately understood. He said, Indra, what you mean is that if I enter the glazed devil pagoda, there is a possibility that I will awaken the fiend god origin embryo, right? Nie Tian could feel that the glazed qi was mysterious and strange. It had a strong effect on all kinds of power in his body. At this time, he hadn't entered the demon pagoda yet. His martial physique had already entered an active state. Once he entered the demon pagoda and absorbed more glazed qi, the fiend god origin embryo would be stimulated, and there was a high possibility that it would awaken. Yes. Indra nodded and said, I don't know what kind of power the glazed qi is. I'm afraid it is a higher form of power than the spirit force. Perhaps this power will be very helpful to your martial physique. However, once the fiend god origin embryo is stimulated, you will be in a dangerous situation. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression became ugly. This was a situation he didn't expect. He wasn't ready to awaken the fiend god origin embryo. Moreover, his current strength was too weak. If the secret of the fiend god origin embryo was exposed, it would be impossible for him to leave this place alive. What should I do? Nie Tian's mind was spinning rapidly. He couldn't make up his mind for a moment. He was worried that if he withdrew now, it would definitely arouse the suspicion of Yang Wu and Xueman Shuang. Although Yang Wu had been very friendly until now, Nie Tian didn't know his identity, so he didn't trust him. Needless to say, Xueman Shuang's intention was even more impure. Let's gamble. Thinking of this, Nie Tian's heart sank and his eyes trembled. He decided to enter the glazed devil pagoda. With a low roar in his heart, Nie Tian took a step forward and directly entered the glazed devil pagoda. The moment he entered the devil pagoda, he felt that the glazed qi around him instantly became much thicker. This was a very mysterious power. It surged in the space like countless vortexes, surging into Nie Tian's body. In an instant, Nie Tian felt that every meridian, every inch of skin, and every piece of bone in his body was filled with glazed qi. The blood in his body suddenly became restless. The blood in his body surged wildly, and he couldn't control it. The glazed qi was indeed very strange. It could stimulate the power contained in a warrior's martial body. Nie Tian took a deep breath and relaxed his body, allowing the glazed qi to surge into his body even more violently. He looked up. The glazed qi there was even thicker, almost liquefied into water. Chen Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue were still moving upwards, wanting to ascend to a higher place. Nie Tian's figure moved. He stepped on the void and moved upwards. His speed was very fast. In just a few breaths, he directly arrived at the second level of the glazed devil pagoda. On the second level, the glazed qi was obviously thicker. The blood in Nie Tian's body was close to going berserk. He was in a very active state and his body felt like it was bursting with power. The glazed qi is really mysterious. I want to enter a higher level. Nie Tian smiled slightly and moved upwards with all his might. Soon, he arrived at the third level and caught up with Gongsun Baoyue. Gongsun Baoyue's pretty face was flushed red. She looked at Nie Tian strangely. She didn't expect this silver-haired boy to be so talented. He entered the glazed devil pagoda one step later than her, but he actually caught up so quickly. Nie Tian didn't pay attention to Gongsun Baoyue. He walked up without looking back. At this moment, on the fourth level, Chen Wuqing's figure stopped. A pair of cold eyes looked down at Nie Tian, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Brat, your path ends here. The fourth level of the glazed devil pagoda will be your burial ground. Chen Wuqing smiled coldly in his heart, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Chapter 1506. Outside the glazed pagoda. Everyone's attention was focused on the demonic pagoda where the lesser god leaders resided. The three lesser god leaders this time are very talented. Two of them have reached the third floor, and the last one has reached the fourth floor. Not bad. Yang Wu looked at the glazed pagoda and couldn't help but smile as he murmured. The kid on the fourth floor has stopped. It seems like he's tired. Xueman Huang raised her eyebrows and pondered. On the other side, Jiang Baoyu, the holy adjudicator of the flame heaven realm, had a sinister smile on his face as he thought to himself, Chen Wuqing stopped on the 4th floor not because he's tired, but because he's going to kill. At the same time, inside the glazed pagoda, Nie Tian could feel the glazed qi around him getting denser and denser. The blood qi in his body was getting more and more violent, giving him a feeling that he was growing stronger. Glazed qi is indeed good stuff, Nie Tian muttered with a smile at the corner of his mouth as he dashed towards the 4th level. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the 4th floor. He immediately felt the glazed qi in the air getting denser and couldn't help but smile. He believed that with the help of the glazed qi, he could not only refine his martial body, but also increase his strength. However, at this moment, Nie Tian suddenly felt a cold, killing intent. He raised his head and saw Chen Wuqing looking at him with a gloomy face. Chen Wuqing. Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed slightly. He didn't expect Chen Wuqing to be so arrogant and dare to attack in the glazed pagoda. The glazed pagoda was a great opportunity for all cultivators. Chen Wuqing wanted to kill Nie Tian instead of climbing the pagoda. This made Nie Tian very confused. In fact, he didn't have any deep enmity with Chen Wuqing. He didn't understand why the latter's killing intent was so strong. Nie Tian didn't know that Chen Wuqing had already regarded him as his biggest competitor. He wasn't interested in the Holy Parliament, but Chen Wuqing was very eager to join it. However, Jiang Baoyu told him that the Holy Parliament would only allow one leader to join at most at a time. In this way, Chen Wuqing treated Nie Tian as his biggest competitor and had to get rid of him. Nie Tian, you're not bad. You're actually able to reach the 4th level. However, your path ends here. Chen Wuqing's figure moved. He smiled coldly and his eyes were filled with killing intent. If Nie Tian had not entered the 4th floor, he could still have survived. But since he had entered the 4th floor, there was absolutely no chance for him to survive. Chen Wuqing knew how difficult it was to enter the 4th level, but Nie Tian seemed to be very relaxed, which made his killing intent even more determined. You want to kill me? Nie Tian's eyes flickered. He really couldn't understand where the other party's killing intent was coming from. A trash stepping into the glazed demon pagoda is a joke in itself. Chen Wuqing smiled coldly and spoke in a deep voice. Immediately after, his figure swooped down and struck out with his palm. Boom! With a muffled sound, the violent palm force smashed down like a mountain, blasting towards Nie Tian. The space inside the glazed demon pagoda wasn't big. When Chen Wuqing's palm landed, the entire pagoda seemed to be shaking. Nie Tian frowned slightly. Feeling the surging blood qi in his body, his face turned cold and he struck out with his sword. Pung! A sword blasted out. The moment the sword and the palm collided, the glazed demon pagoda suddenly shook. Suddenly, the endless glazed qi became violent, as if it was about to break through the pagoda. Nie Tian felt a violent force pressing down on him. His figure couldn't help but sink for a few meters. He was actually forced to retreat to the 3rd level. Nie Tian, obediently accept your death. Chen Wuqing sneered when he saw that Nie Tian was forced to retreat. His figure was like a gust of wind, and his aura was released wildly. His whole body turned into a ball of blazing flames, and he pounced on Nie Tian like a wild beast. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. Chen Wuqing was, after all, a mid-level god realm cultivator. In addition to his innate godhead, his combat strength was astonishing. Double ghosts of heaven and earth. At this critical moment, Nie Tian bellowed. Both of his palms struck out, and the 2 black snakes merged into one, soaring into the sky. Rumble! Another violent, muffled sound rang in the air. The glazed demon pagoda shook even more violently. Nie Tian's figure sank again. In the blink of an eye, he was already beside Gongsun Baoyue. Outside the glazed demon pagoda. What happened? Yang Wu's expression changed when he saw the glazed demon pagoda shaking. Isn't it clear? Those two brats are fighting inside the pagoda. Shui Manzhuang smirked. He had a playful look on his face, as if he was watching a show. Bastard! Yang Wu roared furiously. The glazed demon pagoda is the Holy Parliament's supreme treasure. Can they bear the consequences if something happens to it? At this moment, Heartbroken Prince, Jiang Baoyu, and the others looked embarrassed. If something really happened to the glazed demon pagoda, they would also be implicated. Elder Yang, why are you so nervous? It's just the glazed demon pagoda's 3,000 doppelgangers. If it's destroyed, then so be it. There's no need to feel pity. However, Shui Manzhuang didn't seem to care at all. He said faintly, I wonder which of those two brats is stronger. 3,000 doppelgangers. Heartbroken Prince was dumbfounded when he heard Shui Manzhuang's words. He didn't quite understand what the latter meant. Shui Manzhuang was right. The two glazed demon pagoda that Yang Wu took out were only two doppelgangers of the glazed demon pagoda. The glazed demon pagoda had 3,000 doppelgangers. Although these two doppelgangers were precious, they weren't that precious. Even if they were destroyed, it wouldn't affect the glazed demon pagoda too much. Yang Wu cold looked at Shui Manzhuang and didn't say anything. Inside the glazed demon pagoda, Chen Wuqing attacked repeatedly. Although he was able to force Nie Tian to retreat, he couldn't hurt Nie Tian. This made him very angry. He was a dignified cultivator with innate godhead, and his strength had reached the mid-god realm. But he couldn't even kill a low-god realm martial artist. It was really shameful. Nie Tian's eyes were as gloomy as water. He looked at Chen Wuqing with a cold expression. He was afraid that the glazed demon pagoda would collapse, so he had tolerated it several times. However, Chen Wuqing was too overbearing. Chen Wuqing, stop now! Gongsun Baoyue shouted at this time. Her beautiful eyes flickered with panic. Although her talent wasn't as good as Chen Wuqing and Nie Tian, she still wanted to climb the glazed demon pagoda, hoping to improve her martial physique. Who do you think you are? You're courting death. However, Chen Wuqing's eyes were bloodshot. In addition to the stimulation of the glazed demon pagoda's blood qi, he almost went crazy. He roared and his figure flashed. He punched at Gongsun Baoyue. The wind from his punch was like lightning, rolling and pressing towards Gongsun Baoyue. Watch out! Nie Tian frowned and shouted. He could tell that Chen Wuqing was a wind and fire dual attribute cultivator. His strength was tyrannical. Gongsun Baoyue's strength was also at the mid-god realm. However, her strength and talent were obviously below Chen Wuqing's. Chapter 1507. Rumble. A violent collision sounded from within the glazed pagoda. The pagoda shook violently as if it couldn't withstand the force any longer. Ah! The next moment, a shrill scream was heard. Gongsun Baoyue's body trembled as she was forced to retreat. She spurted out a mouthful of blood. Her strength was originally below Chen Wuqing's. On top of that, Chen Wuqing had the upper hand. Therefore, she couldn't even take a single punch from him. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian moved to Gongsun Baoyue's side and asked, Miss Gongsun, are you alright? Although he wasn't familiar with Gongsun Baoyue, she didn't seem to be a bad person. At least, she was much stronger than Chen Wuqing. I'm fine, Gongsun Baoyue let out a long breath. Her complexion turned slightly better. She didn't expect Chen Wuqing to be so strong. She couldn't even take a single blow from him when they were of the same strength. At this moment, Gongsun Baoyue's beautiful eyes flickered. She looked at Nie Tian suspiciously. She couldn't understand how Nie Tian could fight with Chen Wuqing for so long when he was only a low god. In fact, when Gongsun Baoyue learned of Nie Tian's strength, she also looked down on him. She wondered if the experts of the God-shocking Realmverse were really trash like Chen Wuqing said. It was indeed unusual that the leader of the low god leaders was only a late-stage low god. Stand down. Let me deal with this guy. Nie Tian gave Gongsun Baoyue an indifferent glance and stepped forward. His eyes were brimming with murderous intent. Since Chen Wuqing insisted on fighting, Nie Tian had no choice but to play along to the end. Nie Tian, if I don't kill you today, I'm not Chen Wuqing. Chen Wuqing sneered. He raised his palm and a red and white whirlpool appeared on his palm. Inside the whirlpool, there were extremely violent wind and fire attribute divine energy surging. It looked extremely strange. I'll take your life in one move. Chen Wuqing's lips curled into a cold smile. His entire face turned hideous. Is that so? Nie Tian's face sank as he sensed that the vortex of wind and fire was extremely powerful. Gongsun Baoyue sensed that something was amiss. With a flash, she automatically retreated to the second floor and watched the battle from afar. Die! Chen Wuqing smiled coldly. He flipped his palm and slammed it down. Instantly, a hurricane-like fire pillar appeared and spread across the entire glazed demon pagoda. Like a tsunami, it struck down violently. Not good. Nie Tian's gaze trembled slightly. Immediately after, he sensed that something was wrong. Instantly, his body trembled and the astral soul shield was activated. However, it extended outwards and enveloped the glazed demon pagoda. He sensed that if he did not stop Chen Wuqing, the glazed demon pagoda would not be able to withstand the power of the fire pillar and would collapse. However, at this moment, a huge pillar of fire came crashing down. The scorching aura spread out and instantly enveloped Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes flashed. Boundless astral energy gushed forth from his body as he activated his astral soul armor. However, he was still a step too late. A large amount of wind and fire power surged into his body, instantly wreaking havoc in his body. Ah! In an instant, Nie Tian felt that his entire body was about to be torn apart. Excruciating pain spread throughout his body, causing him to scream in agony. Ha ha, die! Chen Wuqing laughed maniacally as he succeeded in his attack. His entire body became distorted. He did not know why, but when he saw that Nie Tian was about to die, he felt incomparably excited. The glazed qi could not only stimulate the power of a cultivator's martial body, but it could also affect the emotions of a cultivator. Especially for a person like Chen Wuqing, who was originally very bloodthirsty. When he was stimulated by the glazed qi, it was even easier for him to become violent. Nie Tian. Gongsun Baoyue saw that Nie Tian was injured. She screamed and her face turned pale. Nie Tian's body floated in midair. His entire face became hideous and terrifying. Within his body, all the meridians in his body were enduring the scorching power of the wind and fire. The excruciating pain simply wanted to burn his body into ashes. If it wasn't for the supreme twin flames in his body, he would have already turned into ashes. Still not dead yet? When Chen Wuqing saw that Nie Tian was still holding on, the corner of his mouth curled up into a cold, murderous look. He made his move again and threw out a palm strike. Endless flames condensed into a flaming blade and whizzed out. Bang! With a muffled sound, the flaming blade bombarded on Nie Tian's body and pierced through his chest. The wound became charred before blood flowed out. Oh no! When Gongsun Baoyue saw this, she immediately felt that Nie Tian's aura had suddenly weakened. She couldn't help but scream and dashed towards Nie Tian. Die! Ha! When Chen Wuqing saw this, he laughed maniacally and said, "A mere low-god trash wants to compete with me? You're courting death." However, at this moment, his maniacal laughter came to an abrupt end. In an instant, he felt that there was a terrifying dark energy surging in Nie Tian's body. This energy was extremely terrifying. It was like an abyss that wanted to devour everything. The next moment, a strange scene happened. Nie Tian's body trembled slightly, and the wound on his chest healed in the blink of an eye. Devil aura! Nie Tian was stunned and exclaimed in his heart. Just now, when he was hit by Chen Wuqing, the dark devil aura in his body released an incomparably violent power and healed his wound in an instant. The violent dark energy didn't disappear. Instead, it roared crazily in Nye Tian's body. Almost in an instant, it directly devoured the power of wind and fire in his body. Nye Tian suddenly raised his head and reacted. He looked at Chen Wuqing sternly. This. Chen Wuqing was stunned and his eyes became extremely shocked. He said in astonishment, "This is impossible." Nye Tian was clearly hit by him. How could he recover in an instant? What was even more strange was that Nye Tian's aura seemed to have become stronger. "Chen Wuqing, I originally didn't want to be entangled with you. However, you kept trying to kill me. Don't blame me for this," Nye Tianling said coldly. His eyes actually turned dark and it was extremely strange. "Nye Tian, Chen Wuqing was stunned. He felt the murderous intent in Nye Tian's eyes. That pair of murderous eyes was actually like an abyss. It was actually so dark that one couldn't see the bottom. At this moment, Chen Wuqing felt a strong sense of fear. He even started to regret his decision to oppose Nye Tian. However, it was too late. The next moment Nye Tian moved. Dark energy surged out from his body and wrapped around his body like a dark demon. Chen Wuqing suddenly reacted and struck out with his palm, trying to block Nye Tian's attack. Nye Tianling smiled. At this moment, under the stimulation of the dark devil aura, he felt that his whole body was bursting with power. It was definitely not something that Chen Wuqing could block. Die. Nye Tian's eyes suddenly changed and turned into a strange dark black color again. His face revealed extreme ferocity. He used his palm to hit. The dark palm shadow fell and the violent killing intent bloomed in the air. Boom! A loud sound was heard. Chen Wuqing's palm directly collapsed under the dark palm shadow. Chapter 1508. Nye Tian's palm landed and blasted Chen Wuqing away. In midair, a bloody trail appeared. Chen Wuqing's body was covered in blood, and he stood shakily. One palm, just one palm. The dark devil aura in Nye Tian's body erupted with terrifying power, directly beating Chen Wuqing to the point where he couldn't fight back. However, Nye Tian's face was ferocious and bloodthirsty. His eyes had turned dark, completely black. If Cher was here, she would be able to see that the evil power in Nye Tian's blood had erupted. Last time when Nye Tian condensed devil aura, this evil power had erupted. Now, under the stimulation of the glass aura, it erupted again. Nye Tian. In the divine sense, Sakra's voice sounded, wanting to wake Nye Tian up. However, Nye Tian turned a deaf ear. He walked towards Chen Wuqing step by step. His killing intent spread like a mountain and the sea, attacking the entire Glaze Demon Pagoda. At the same time, outside the Glaze Demon Pagoda. What's going on? Yang Wu looked at the Glaze Demon Pagoda in the sky. His eyes were dull, and his face was full of fear. His voice was also trembling. Shui Manzhuang also had a shocked expression. She didn't know what was happening. The others were even more frightened, looking at the Glaze Demon Pagoda in horror. At this time, the Glaze Demon Pagoda was still surrounded by a glass halo. However, in the endless halo, a dark aura was released, and it became more and more intense. It was very terrifying. In the blink of an eye, the Glaze Demon Pagoda was shrouded by the dark aura, and the glass halo was about to be swallowed by the dark aura. Why is the Glaze Demon Pagoda releasing dark aura? Yang Wu's face was full of fear and strange. He had no idea what was happening. This aura. At this time, Divine Adjudicator Nye Wushang seemed to have noticed something. His face became shocked and strange. From the dark aura released by the Glaze Demon Pagoda, he clearly felt the forbidden aura of the god imprisoning fetus. Nye Wushang was a member of the Fengyan Nye clan, and the god-restricting fetus was unique to the Fengyan Nye clan, so it was equivalent to the power of the Nye clan's bloodline. Although Nye Wushang didn't have the soul-forbidding fetus, he had the Nye clan's bloodline, so he was very sensitive to soul-forbidding aura. He was sure that the dark aura contained the god-sealing aura, but he was very puzzled. Since when did the god-forbidding aura become the power of darkness? He could clearly feel that within the dark aura of the demon pagoda, other than the spirit confinement aura, there was another powerful aura that was no weaker than the spirit confinement aura. A power that can contend against god-restricting aura, and it's also so dark. Could it be the legendary extreme devil aura of the extreme devil fetus? Nie Wuxiang was very smart. She immediately thought of something, and her expression suddenly changed. A person who possesses both god-forbidding qi and extreme demonic qi, it's obvious that he has the legendary fiend god nascent embryo. Among those three lesser god chiefs, there's a silver-haired martial artist called Nie Tian. Could it be that he's... Thinking up to this point, Nie Wuxiang didn't dare to think any further. Her whole body directly stiffened, as if she had been petrified. At this time, everyone else was also stunned, and they became completely lifeless. No one had expected that such a thing would actually happen in the glazed demon pagoda. And on the other side, Cher looked at the glazed demon pagoda. She seemed to have thought of something, and her delicate and pretty face became panicked. She felt that the evil aura in Nie Tian's blood had erupted, and that the dark aura was released by Nie Tian. And this time, the evil aura was clearly more berserk than before. Cher, are you alright? Emo Rushi saw that Cher's expression wasn't right, and she couldn't help but frown and ask. Big Sister Rushi, something happened to Nie Tian. Cher suddenly reacted and said. Immediately, her figure moved, and she directly flew towards the glazed demon pagoda. Nie Tian. Emo Rushi was stunned for a moment, but she immediately reacted. Phoenix wings appeared on her back, and she followed Cher's figure into the glazed demon pagoda. Nie Chio was stunned. He looked at the surrounding people, but ultimately didn't move. When the others saw Emo Rushi and Cher enter the glazed demon pagoda, they couldn't help but be surprised. Xueman Shuang's eyes darkened, and a trace of killing intent appeared on her face. She suddenly looked at Yang Wu and said in a cold tone, Elder Yang, someone entered the glazed demon pagoda without permission. This is a violation of the Holy Parliament's rules. Quickly close the glazed demon pagoda. Yang Wu was slightly stunned and his expression changed. He didn't expect that Emo Rushi and Cher would suddenly enter the glazed demon pagoda. This was indeed a violation of the Holy Parliament's rules. The glazed demon pagoda was an ancient treasure, and not everyone was qualified to enter it. Elder Yang, what are you waiting for? Close the demon pagoda. Xueman Zhuang saw that Yang Wu was hesitating and couldn't help but urge. Yang Wu's eyes flickered. Of course, he understood what closing the demon pagoda meant. If the glazed demon pagoda was closed now, everyone in the demon pagoda would die inside. No. Thinking of this, Yang Wu replied in a cold tone, Elder Xue, the three lesser god chiefs are still in the demon pagoda. We can't close it now. Yang Wu you. Xueman Shuang's face was gloomy, and she directly called Yang Wu by his name. Xueman Zhuang, I will personally explain this matter to the Holy Parliament. I won't implicate you. Yang Wu looked at Xueman Zhuang and said in a cold tone. Nie Tian was still in the glazed demon pagoda. How could Yang Wu close the demon pagoda? Xueman Zhuang looked at Yang Wu hatefully, but there was nothing she could do. At the same time, in the glazed demon pagoda, the glazed qi in the glazed demon pagoda was still very dense, but the entire demon pagoda was filled with dark aura. Nie Tian's body was constantly releasing terrifying dark energy. He was like a demon that walked out of hell, and his whole body had turned into a dark abyss. Nie Tian you. Chen Wuqing looked at Nie Tian in front of him. He was so panicked that he couldn't speak. The real aura of death made him feel intense despair. Gongsun Baoyue was also stunned. She didn't know what happened to Nie Tian. Nie Tian's dark eyes flickered. His reason was gradually swallowed by the dark aura, and only the strongest desire to kill was left. Nie Tian. At this time, Mo Rushi and Cher appeared at the same time. They couldn't help but exclaim when they saw the dense dark aura around Nie Tian. Why did you come in? Gongsun Baoyue was shocked to see two more people come in. Mo Rushi and Shui however, didn't pay any attention to her, and dashed towards Nie Tian at the same time. Unfortunately, Nie Tian was on the 3rd floor, while they were on the 1st floor. The glazed demon pagoda was very strange. The distance between the 2 floors wasn't so easy to reach. When Nie Tian heard someone calling him, he looked back. His eyes instantly became clear, but in the next moment it became dark. He raised the corner of his mouth coldly and squeezed out a word, "Kill!" As soon as he said the word, he took a step forward. He raised his demon-like palm and slammed down violently, directly towards Chen Wuqing's head. Chapter 1509. In the glazed demon pagoda, Nie Tian's eyes were like a dark abyss. His entire person was like a devil from hell, constantly releasing rolling dark aura. He slammed his palm down and a dark claw appeared in the air, pressing down on Chen Wuqing. No! At this moment, Chen Wuqing felt the real breath of death approaching. The despair in his heart expanded infinitely through his eyes. Horrified howls resounded in the glazed demon pagoda, but it only showed his helplessness. Nie Tian sneered and the ruthlessness in his eyes became more intense. Just as the fatal palm was about to land on Chen Wuqing suddenly sensed something. His expression changed abruptly, turning into horror and joy. At this moment, Chen Wuqing's body suddenly released a white light. It was incomparably holy and wrapped him up. Rumble! In the next moment, Nie Tian's fatal palm fell and bombarded on the white light shield around Chen Wuqing. After a loud bang, it actually couldn't break the light shield. Instead, he was enveloped by the holy light that gushed out from the light shield. His entire person instantly became much clearer. At this moment, Chen Wuqing suddenly felt his heart tremble. His godhead actually released a huge amount of energy. Immediately, a holy light figure appeared. It was actually an unfamiliar face of a woman. Such a powerful soul force! Nie Tian was also wrapped by this huge energy. Looking at the holy light figure that appeared in front of him, he couldn't help but exclaim. This energy was very pure. Although it was terrifying, it didn't have any destructive power. It only had the purest function of protection. Under the influence of this energy, Nie Tian's eyes actually became much clearer and his consciousness gradually recovered. Nie Tian. Indra's voice sounded again. Noticing that Nie Tian's consciousness had sobered up, he was extremely excited. He felt for a moment and immediately understood and said, "This is the innate protection power." Innate protection? Nie Tian was suddenly stunned as he didn't understand Indra's meaning. Indra looked at the holy light figure and said, "That woman is Chen Wuqing's mother. Her energy was absorbed by Chen Wuqing. Before her death, she condensed the last of her energy into this innate protection to protect her son." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He roughly knew what was going on. Chen Wuqing had an innate godhead, which was equivalent to robbing his mother's power. Not only did his mother help him condense his godhead, but she also left behind this innate protection in his godhead before she died. When Chen Wuqing was forced to a dead end by Nie Tian, he activated the innate defense in his body. In the air, the pure and holy light figure looked at Chen Wuqing. She had seen through all of Chen Wuqing's memories. Her originally gratified face turned into incomparable disappointment. "Wuqing, how did you become such a person?" The holy silhouette looked at Chen Wuqing. Chen Wuqing was the son she had protected with her life, but at this moment she did not feel happy. Instead, she felt deep disappointment. "Mother, Chen Wuqing communicated with his mother through his soul. Looking at his mother's disappointed expression, countless scenes flashed through his mind. Everything he had done over the years, the people he had killed, the people he had insulted, the things he had done, one by one, flashed through his mind. My son shouldn't be such a person. The holy silhouette was heartbroken. Faint light spots appeared at the corner of her eyes. She cried. In her heart, her son should have become a respected martial artist, but what she saw was Chen Wuqing becoming a violent and unreasonable person. He was injured and stained with countless needless blood. He had completely become a butcher. She did not want to see Chen Wuqing like this. The holy silhouette and Chen Wuqing's mother were connected. Chen Wuqing could feel her heartache. That kind of loss, that kind of despair, made him feel so much pain that he wanted to die. However, at this moment, the holy silhouette's radiance slowly dimmed. She was just a soul power, she could not exist for long. This time, it would be the first and last time she met her son. This was the only time she met him in her life, but the person she saw was a completely different person from what she had imagined. This kind of heartache was unimaginable. Chen Wuqing. At the last moment, she said word by word in a deep voice, "My son shouldn't be such a person." As the cold voice fell, the holy silhouette could no longer hold on and disappeared instantly. However, the last scene, the light spots at the corner of her eyes, were deeply imprinted in Chen Wuqing's mind. "Mother, I." Chen Wuqing looked at the empty space in front of him and said in a daze. He felt like he had just woken up from a dream. Nie Tian saw everything, but he only shook his head and did not say anything. A mother's love for her child was the most sacred. Chen Wuqing's mother was willing to sacrifice her own life for him. He hoped that after this, Chen Wuqing would wake up. Nie Tian also regained his calmness at this time, and the dark aura around him gradually dispersed. He had just absorbed some innate protection energy, and inexplicably calmed down. Nie Tian, are you all right? At this time, Mo Rushi and Cher's figures appeared and asked nervously. Nie Tian was stunned when he saw the two of them. He did not expect them to appear here. I'm fine. Nie Tian smiled faintly. Since Mo Rushi and Cher were here, he could climb the glazed demon pagoda. He was also very curious about which level of the demon pagoda Mo Rushi and Cher would reach with their talent. Mo Rushi and Cher, one had the sage body, and the other had the 3 lives meridians. It was hard to say who was more talented. However, Nie Tian felt that since Tian Chief of the inescapable net could set foot on the 9th level of the demon pagoda, then Her Royal Highness Cher should not be lower than the 9th level. Let's go forward together. Nie Tian raised his head and looked at the 9-level demon pagoda. He smiled and released a sharp aura. After absorbing a large amount of glazed qi, Nie Tian felt that his strength was constantly condensing, and there were signs of him breaking through to the peak of the lower deity stage. Moreover, his sword Dao realm was also on the verge of a breakthrough. He believed that as long as he continued to move forward, he would definitely break through. Nie Tian, your devil aura has become violent just now. If you continue to move forward, the God-fiend origin embryo will definitely awaken. At this time, Sakra's voice sounded low and solemn. He felt that the God-fiend origin embryo was already in an extremely active state. In addition to the impact brought by the devil aura, it could awaken at any time. God-fiend origin embryo. Nie Tian let out a long breath. Then, his eyes trembled and he said in a deep voice, "Since I've come to the glazed demon pagoda, how can I give up? Even if the God-fiend origin embryo awakens, I still want to see how mysterious the glazed demon pagoda is." Thinking of this, Nie Tian's eyes became firm, and he stared straight at the top of the glazed demon pagoda. All right. Seeing that Nie Tian had made his decision, Sakra could only nod and said, "I will try my best to help you suppress the aura of the God-fiend origin embryo, but it's hard to say whether I can suppress it or not." In fact, Sakra knew that Nie Tian's God-fiend origin embryo could no longer be suppressed. Even if he left the glazed demon pagoda now, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Chapter 15:10. Outside the glazed demon pagoda, Yang Wu and the others were stunned. The demon pagoda had returned to normal, but they didn't know what had happened. Those people are moving. Yang Wu saw several light spots moving in the demon pagoda, and he couldn't help but exclaim. The others were relieved to see that the glazed demon pagoda was fine, and they began to focus their attention on the light spots. In just a blink of an eye, the 3 light spots had arrived at the 5th level. The 5th level. Yang Wu's eyes trembled violently, and he was very surprised. Those who could enter the 5th level of the glazed demon pagoda were all monstrous geniuses, but the speed of those 3 people was extremely fast, as though it was effortless. Elder Yang, who do you think those 3 people are? Shuemanchuang's eyes were gloomy as he said sinisterly. Now that there were 5 people in the demon pagoda, it wasn't difficult to determine who the 3 light spots were. Mo Rushi and Cher entered the glazed demon pagoda for Nye Tian, and the relationship between the 3 was obvious. Therefore, those 3 people were obviously them. Yang Wu ignored Shuemanchuang, and his eyes became blazing as he thought, Nye Tian, if you are really Big Brother's son, you will definitely not stop at the 5th level. Yang Wu had a hunch that perhaps Nye Tian would break everyone's record and enter above the 9th level of the glazed demon pagoda. Inside the demon pagoda, Nye Tian, Mo Rushi, and Cher quickly arrived at the 5th level. Below them, Chen Wuqing was still thinking, and Gongsun Baoyue finally stopped at the 3rd level and didn't continue climbing. When he arrived at the 5th level, Nye Tian clearly felt that the glazed qi had become much thicker, and the blood qi in his body was surging violently. He could even faintly feel the aura of the god-fiend nascent embryo. When the god-fiend nascent embryo devoured Sakra's remnant soul, Nye Tian felt that kind of aura, so he wasn't unfamiliar with it. Nye Tian's heart was beating rapidly. He also didn't know what would happen when the god-fiend nascent embryo awakened. Rushi, Cher, how are you? Nye Tian looked at Mo Rushi and Cher and asked with a smile. Mo Rushi and Cher were both very relaxed. It was obvious that the 5th floor was not their limit. Next, Nye Tian and the other 2 continued to climb. However, after entering the 5th floor, their speed clearly slowed down, not as fast as before. About half an hour later, the 3 of them passed through the 6th and 7th levels and set foot on the 8th level. The 3 of them reached the 8th floor at the same time. Outside the glazed demon pagoda, Yang Wu and the others were dumbfounded. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed the scene in front of them. 3 people had actually reached the 8th floor at the same time, and their speed was not slow. Looking at this trend, they could definitely enter the 9th floor. Heartbroken Prince and the others looked at the glazed demon pagoda. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. On the other side, Nye Wushang's expression was extremely solemn. He was still not completely sure of Nye Tian's identity. He only hoped that this scene would end quickly, because he had to return to Wind and Cloud Alliance and report this to the Alliance Master. The appearance of the legendary fiend god nascent embryo was a huge matter. Inside the glazed demon pagoda, Nye Tian and the other 2 entered the 8th floor. The glazed qi here was already very dense, and they could feel the presence of the glazed qi just by stretching out their hands. At this moment, the blood in Nye Tian's body was boiling non-stop, and his body was filled with a faint blood aura. He was almost in a berserk state. On the other hand, Mo Rushi's body was filled with a strong flame aura, and her body was releasing a golden light. This was the saint energy in her body. However, Cher didn't have any reaction. Her condition was not affected at all, and her expression was calm as usual, as though she was not affected by the glazed qi at all. However, her speed was also gradually slowing down, as she was undergoing the test of the glazed demon pagoda. Nye Tian looked at Cher and couldn't help but frown. He used his divine sense to probe and discovered that there was not a single bit of glazed qi in Cher's body. It was as though her body was isolated from all external forces. The glazed qi was surging outside her body, but it couldn't enter her body. What exactly is the pulse of 3 lives? It's not affected by the 100 void chi, nor is it affected by the glazed chi. This is incredible, Nye Tian murmured in his heart. Although he had personally created the pulse of 3 lives for share, he didn't know what it was exactly. Vaguely, Nye Tian felt that the power of the pulse of 3 lives was definitely more than what it was now. Share's potential in the future was infinitely terrifying. After entering the 8th floor, Nye Tian felt an obvious pressure. This terrifying pressure seemed to descend directly from the void, and he couldn't resist it. He could only endure it silently. Dense beads of sweat seeped out of Mo Rushi's pretty face, and it was obvious that she was struggling. Share's expression didn't change much, but her pace was obviously slower, and she looked to be in pain. The 8th floor made the body of a sage and the pulse of 3 lives feel strenuous. Nye Tian also felt that the pressure was getting stronger, but he could still climb up steadily. Next, another half an hour passed, and Nye Tian and the other 2 finally reached the 9th floor. The 9th floor was the highest record of the glazed demonic pagoda. 3 people reached it at the same time. How is this possible? Outside the glazed demonic pagoda, Yang Wu was completely stunned and said in a daze. If only one person entered the 9th floor, he could still reluctantly accept it. But now, 3 people reached the 9th floor at the same time. This was really too unbelievable. If today's matter was spread out, it would definitely alarm the 9 major realms. In the hundreds of thousands of years of history of the glazed demonic pagoda, only 2 people had entered the 9th floor. But today, 3 people entered the 9th floor at the same time. This was too shocking. Xueman Huang was also dumbfounded. Her mouth was wide open, but she couldn't say anything. Among the 3 people who entered the 9th floor, Nye Tian must be among them. His talent is actually not weaker than the Young Alliance Masters. Could it be that he really has a fiend god nascent embryo? Nye Wushang exclaimed in her heart, and her facial features scrunched up together. At the same time, in the glazed demonic pagoda, when Nye Tian set foot on the 9th floor, his whole body was already covered in sweat. The blood in his body was almost unable to be suppressed, as if it was about to gush out. The stimulation of the glazed chi on a martial artist's martial body was too strong. When that kind of power entered the martial artist's martial body, the martial artist could clearly feel that the meridians, bones, and blood were all being strengthened bit by bit. The pressure on the 9th floor was already very great. Mo Rushi and Cher began to pant. This was already close to their limit. Nye Tian also panted heavily, and his brows were tightly knitted. He wondered in his heart, Rushi and Cher are both top-notch talents, but they can actually only step into the 9th floor of the glazed demonic pagoda. What exactly is this glazed demonic pagoda? It's so strange. Although the 9th floor was the record of the glazed demonic pagoda, the entire pagoda had 18 floors. In other words, Nye Tian and the others had only reached half of it. Mo Rushi had a sage physique, known as the number 1 martial physique since ancient times. With such talent, she could only reach half of it. This was too strange. Thinking of this, Nye Tian's eyes became complicated. He really couldn't understand what grade of sacred artifact the glazed demonic pagoda was. At this time, Nye Tian could no longer move. With every step he took, he could feel an enormous and boundless pressure pressing down on him, almost tearing his body apart. With a thought, Nye Tian activated the holographic divine pattern and tried to sense the glazed demonic pagoda. But at this moment, he suddenly felt a familiar aura appear. His expression changed, and he cried out in his heart, "Not good!" At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly felt a majestic life force appear in his body. Chapter 15:11. Inside the glazed demon pagoda, Nye Tian had just set foot on the 9th floor and was about to continue climbing, but he suddenly felt a majestic life force appearing in his body, causing his entire body to freeze. "Nye Tian, what's wrong?" Emorushi, who was constantly observing Nyetian, couldn't help but cry out when she saw the latter's abnormal expression. Nyetian's brows were tightly knitted together, and dense beads of sweat slowly seeped out of his forehead, as if he was suffering from great pain. Nyetian! Emorushi and Cher cried out at the same time, and their pretty faces were filled with terror, not knowing what was happening to Nyetian's body. "Don't come near me!" Nyetian suddenly waved his hand, signaling Emorushi and Cher to step back. He felt that his fiend god nascent embryo was about to awaken, and he wasn't sure what would happen next. It would be troublesome if he lost control like last time. In an instant, Nyetian felt a huge and boundless energy explode in his body. Every inch of his body was filled with this energy, and he felt as if his body was about to shatter. Ah! Nyetian couldn't help but let out a miserable howl, and his handsome face became hideous and terrifying. Nyetian! Emorushi and Cher cried out at the same time when they saw Nyetian like this. Their hearts were in their throats, but they didn't dare to step forward. Bang! At this time, in Nyetian's soul space, a low and deep sound resounded, as if a huge heart was beating. Suddenly, the entire soul space was filled with an intense and violent life force. This is the feeling. Nyetian suddenly recalled that when his fiend god nascent embryo devoured Indra's soul, he had heard this voice. The fiend god nascent embryo was really about to awaken. Realizing this, Nyetian endured the pain all over his body, sat cross-legged, and focused all his attention on the soul space. In the soul space, Nyetian felt like he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. In front of him was an endless darkness. He walked in the endless void, feeling the endless silence in his heart. This feeling of despair did not last long, but Nyetian felt as if hundreds or thousands of years had passed. In the next moment, in the endless void, Nyetian vaguely saw a mass of murky and indistinct things slowly becoming clear. It was actually a murky and indistinct vortex. Fiend god nascent embryo. Nyetian looked at the chaotic vortex and exclaimed in his heart. He became excited. Thump! The primal chaos vortex trembled like a powerful heartbeat. Immediately, a mysterious power surged and turned into invisible ripples that filled the soul space, releasing a vast and boundless aura of life. Nyetian had only sensed such a powerful life force in the origin star stones. He tried to get closer to the god-fiend nascent embryo, wanting to see what was being nurtured in the chaos. However, the more he tried, the less he could see. Bang! 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 Immediately after, the frequency of the chaotic vortex's trembling became more and more frequent, as if it had fallen into an extremely violent state. Nyetian looked at the chaotic vortex and carefully sensed its aura. His divine sense gradually merged with the god-fiend nascent embryo. At some point, he finally saw clearly that the god-fiend nascent embryo contained two pure energies. One was a mass of light, the other was a mass of darkness. Originally, these two opposing forces were now perfectly fused together. Faintly, Nyetian felt that he was in the middle of these two energies. This feeling was very real and definitely not an illusion. In the next moment, Nyetian's divine sense and the god-fiend nascent embryo completely fused, but he felt that he was imprisoned in a narrow space. His whole body was wrapped in a layer of transparent barrier that was as thin as a cicada's wing. He wanted to break this barrier, but it was very difficult. The cicada's wing barrier looked fragile, but it was extremely tough. No matter how hard Nyetian tried, he couldn't break it. And just when Nyetian was trying hard to break the imprisonment, the cicada's wing barrier actually began to slowly tighten. Nyetian suddenly felt a suffocating pressure, and even breathing became difficult. Nyetian, this barrier is the suppressive force that your parents left behind. Just at this time, Sakra's voice sounded, and he hurriedly said, "Your strength can't break the suppressive barrier. You have to feel the power of the god-fiend nascent embryo, and use the power of the god-fiend to break the barrier." And When Nye Tian heard Sakra's voice, he nodded his head and immediately understood. His divine sense had already completely fused with the god-fiend nascent embryo. Only by breaking the suppressive barrier could the god-fiend nascent embryo awaken. If he couldn't break the suppressive barrier, not only would the god-fiend nascent embryo not be able to awaken, even he would be suppressed to death. Nye Tian let out a deep breath and tried to feel the aura of the god-fiend nascent embryo. His whole person fell into a mysterious state. He felt as if he was roaming in a boundless ocean. What surged around him was not seawater, but the purest power. Masses of god-fiend power surrounded his body. Nye Tian knew that this was the power contained in the god-fiend nascent embryo, but he couldn't use it. However, at this time, the suppressive barrier was getting tighter and tighter, and it was almost oppressing Nye Tian to death. Nye Tian felt that it was difficult to breathe. It was as if a huge rock was pressing on his chest, and he was almost suffocating. Nye Tian. Outside the soul space, Mo Rushi and Cher couldn't help but cry out when they saw Nye Tian's face turning red and his whole body twisting. They didn't know what happened to Nye Tian, and they could only worry helplessly. They couldn't do anything at this moment. At the same time, outside the glazed demon pagoda, Yang Wu saw that the 3 light spots in the glazed demon pagoda had stopped, and he couldn't help but frown. He enveloped it with his divine sense, trying to sense something. At this moment, his expression changed, and he exclaimed in his heart, "Such terrifying power!" He felt an incomparably terrifying power from the glazed demon pagoda, and he had never seen such a level of power before. One had to know that Yang Wu was a mid-stage paramount god, and he had seen peak paramount gods before. However, the power he felt from the glazed demon pagoda was even more terrifying than the aura of peak paramount gods. How is this possible? On the other side, Shui Man's Huang also felt this terrifying power, and she cried out in fear. Heartbroken Prince and the others were stunned. They didn't feel anything, and they had no idea what was going on. Among those present, only Yang Wu and Shui Man's Huang were peak paramount gods, and they were the only 2 who felt the terrifying power. They didn't understand why the glazed demon pagoda would suddenly release such terrifying power. Of course, they couldn't imagine that this power wasn't released by the glazed demon pagoda, but by Nye Tian. At this time, inside the demon pagoda, inside Nye Tian's soul space, the suppressive barrier had been compressed to the extreme, and Nye Tian's face was flushed red, and he couldn't breathe. But he didn't care, and all his attention was focused on the sea of gods and demons, carefully feeling the power of gods and demons around him. Chapter 15:12. In the origin fetus space, a mighty voice sounded. Nye Tian suddenly felt a mysterious power surging in his palm. He could actually control a trace of the divine demon's power. Suppression barrier break. Nye Tian reacted immediately. With a low roar, he struck out with his palm. A terrifying power gushed out from his palm and turned into a divine demon's palm. Boom! As the fiend god's palm descended, a deafening explosion rang out, and the suppressive barrier around Nye Tian instantly shattered. In the next moment, that strange barrier actually flowed into the origin fetus space and melted into the sea of divine demons. In the instant that the suppressive barrier was broken, a majestic and boundless energy was slowly released, vast and boundless. Not good, the divine demon's power is about to erupt. At the same time, Sakra suddenly felt something and screamed. His soul power turned into a barrier, trying to stop the release of that power. However, his power was too weak. In the face of the divine demon's power, he couldn't even withstand a single blow. Bang! The soul barrier condensed by Sakra instantly collapsed, and even a trace of his remnant soul almost vanished into thin air. If Sakra was in his peak state, he might be able to stop the divine demon's power. However, the current him was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. At this time, in the glazed demon pagoda, Emorushi and Cher looked at Nyetian in front of them. Both of them were stunned and couldn't believe the scene in front of them. In front of them, Nyetian's body was wrapped in a huge black and white ball of light. The strange ball of light rotated slowly and released a dazzling light. The white light and black light intertwined like two giant snakes, controlling the alternation of light and darkness. Emorushi and Cher were shrouded in the black and white light. They felt that the time and space around them had become illusory, as if they didn't exist. Sister Rushi. At this moment, Shui suddenly felt a terrifying power slowly being released from Nyetian's body. Her face immediately stiffened and turned deathly pale. That power was too terrifying. It was as if it could destroy the world. Cher, what's wrong? Emorushi's eyes flickered in confusion. Big Sister Rushi, I can sense an extremely great power within Nyetian's body. Cher opened her mouth slightly, her voice trembling as she said, Nyetian won't explode, right? Emorushi's brows furrowed tightly. Then, she sensed something and her pretty face was filled with shock. She suddenly reacted and screamed, Leave! In an instant, Emorushi felt an abnormally violent energy within Nyetian's body, becoming more and more terrifying. That kind of aura seemed to be able to destroy everything. Without hesitation, Emorushi pulled Cher and retreated. Quickly leave the glazed demon pagoda. The two of them were extremely fast. When they passed by Chen Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue, they shouted. Chen Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue vaguely sensed something, but they weren't too sure. However, when they saw how panicked Emorushi and Cher were, they immediately left the glazed demon pagoda without delay. The four of them exited the glazed demon pagoda, but they couldn't feel anything. Yang Wu and Shui Manzhuang looked at the glazed demon pagoda, and their expressions became more and more shocked. Both of them felt that the power was becoming stronger and was being released uncontrollably. Yang Wu vaguely felt that something terrible was about to happen. His entire face stiffened. At the same time, in the glazed demon pagoda, the black and white light ball around Nyetian's body became bigger and bigger. In the blink of an eye, it had already filled the entire demon pagoda. In the origin embryo space, the power of the fiend god was released like monstrous wave. The aura was boundless, as though it wanted to annihilate and devour everything. Oh no, I don't know what will happen if the power of the fiend god is released. Indra Sakra looked at the enormous power that was gushing out of the fiend god origin embryo. He knew that he couldn't stop it anymore, and his expression was extremely solemn. Boom! In the next moment, the power of the fiend god rushed out of the origin embryo space and suddenly erupted. In an instant, Nyetian's body shook violently. Endless power gushed out and spread in all directions. Boom, boom, boom! An ear-piercing roar sounded. The power of the fiend god was like a raging beast, devouring all the power. The glazed demon pagoda shook a few times, and in the blink of an eye, it was devoured by the power of the fiend god. All the glazed chi was absorbed by Nyetian. Boom! Then, the power of the fiend god rushed out of the glazed demon pagoda and turned into a huge wave. It was like a dragon breaking out of the abyss, rushing into the sky. At this moment, every grass, every tree, every mountain, every rock, and every living thing in the world were trembling. The moment the power of the fiend god was released, everyone present suddenly felt a great tremble. It was as though their souls felt a great threat. Their divine senses suffered a huge impact, and they suddenly trembled and fell to the ground. The power of the fiend god rushed into the sky and directly broke through the void of the territory. It turned into a terrible wave of air and dissipated in the boundless void. At the same time, all the martial artists in the god-shepherding territory felt a huge impact at the same time. Many people vomited blood, and their faces were full of shock. However, the movement caused by the fiend god's power did not stop there. The martial artists in the other territories also felt the impact, and the stronger they were, the stronger the impact. Of the 9 major territories, the three upper realms, God-forbidding region. In a hidden mountain range, on a steep cliff, a loud explosion suddenly erupted, and a white-clothed figure appeared on the cliff. It was a white-robed old man. His aura was like a mountain, and his eyes were as deep as the sea. One look and anyone could tell that he was a peerless expert. However, at this moment, his face was full of fear, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. This power, could it be? The white-robed old man regained his composure after a long time, and his voice trembled. He seemed to have thought of something, and his face became even more shocked. If Yang Wu was here, he would immediately recognize that this white-robed old man was none other than the vice president of the Holy Assembly, Nangong Duxiu. As the vice president of the Holy Assembly, Nangong Duxiu's strength was already at the peak of the supreme god realm. In the entire 9 major territories, the number of people who could defeat him could be counted on 2 hands. He had been cultivating in seclusion, but he was suddenly interrupted by an enormous power, and he even vomited blood. This power terrified him. He could vaguely guess the source of this power, but his guess only made him more afraid. Nangong. At this moment, a black-robed figure suddenly arrived and stood on the peak. From afar, this person looked like the peak of a mountain. Lord President. Nangong Duxiu was thousands of meters away from the black-robed figure, but he did not dare to approach. He only bowed from afar. This person was none other than the supreme existence of the Holy Assembly, the President of the Holy Assembly. No one in the 9 major territories knew who the President of the Holy Assembly was. Even Nangong Duxiu, the Vice President, did not know. In fact, Nangong Duxiu had never seen the President of the Holy Assembly before. He only knew that the President of the Holy Assembly was an existence that was close to a sage. Even a peak god realm martial artist like him would not be able to take a single blow from the President of the Holy Assembly. The President of the Holy Assembly had personally appeared because of what had just happened. Chapter 15:13. God-forbidding region within the mysterious valley. Nangong, you already know what happened, right? The sacred president spoke indifferently. His voice was ethereal as if it came from the void. It was extremely strange. President, is it really the god-fiend nascent embryo? Nangong Duxiu's expression sank. What should we do? The sacred president remained silent for a long time before speaking. Don't panic. Continue as usual. President, you mean we should ignore the god-fiend nascent embryo? Nangong Duxiu asked with a puzzled expression. Yes. The sacred president nodded and sighed. The god-fiend nascent embryo has awakened. Some things cannot be avoided. This time, the Wind-Cloud Alliance will not give in so easily. Nangong Duxiu's expression sank. His eyes were filled with panic as he said, President, are we just going to sit and watch the god-fiend nascent embryo grow? It is related to. Let's wait and see. The Sacred Association leader did not wait for Nangong Duxiu to finish speaking and coldly threw down a sentence. Then, his figure moved and he turned into a rainbow that disappeared into the horizon. Nangong Duxiu looked in the direction where the sacred president disappeared. He was stunned and puzzled. The last time the god-fiend nascent embryo appeared, the sacred president had tried his best to eliminate it. He had even broken off relations with the Wind-Cloud Alliance. Why did his attitude change this time? It was a little confusing. Nangong Duxiu wondered what he was thinking. Nangong Duxiu pondered. With his understanding of the sacred president, perhaps the latter had other uses for the god-fiend nascent embryo. At the same time, God-forbidding region, Wind-Cloud Alliance's Wind-Cloud Great Hall. An azure-robed figure stood outside the Great Hall. His deep eyes looked into the sky. His expression was as deep as water. He was clearly thinking about something. Father. At that moment, a white-robed figure descended and knelt in front of the azure-robed elder. Feiyu, you're here. The azure-robed elder looked at the white-robed figure and spoke. He already knew the latter's goal. The god-fiend nascent embryo has awakened. Fenghua's son is still alive. You want to find that child, right? The azure-robed elder was none other than the Wind-Cloud Alliance's alliance master, Nie Dao. The person kneeling in front of him was his sixth son, Niefeu. Father, Big Brother's son is still alive. We have to bring him back to the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Niefeu said solemnly, unable to conceal the excitement in his voice. The godfiend essence embryo has its own path to walk. Finding him now will only make his path more difficult. Nie Dao closed his eyes and said in a cold tone, I forbid you from looking for that child. Tell the others that no one is allowed to look for him. Why? Niefeu's face was filled with confusion and even anger. He suddenly stood up and growled, Father, back then you gave up Big Brother for the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Are you going to give up on his son now? That's your grandson. Impudent! Nie Dao let out a furious roar, and the surrounding ground was directly lifted up by the shock waves. Immediately after, the entire Wind and Cloud Great Hall began to shake, as if it was about to collapse. I'll say it one more time. No one is allowed to look for him. Nie Dao looked cold at Niefeu and said in a deep voice, Father. Niefeu was in extreme grief. He didn't understand why his father had become so heartless. You can leave. Nie Dao suddenly turned around and said cold. Niefeu let out a long sigh and could only helplessly leave. Nie Dao's figure stood outside the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. When he sensed that Niefeu had left, his burly figure suddenly became stooped. His originally resolute face seemed to have aged in an instant. His gaze looked towards the horizon, and many memories flashed through his mind. God Calamity, back then you forced me to give up on my son. Today, if you dare to touch my grandson, I, Nie Dao, will fight you to the death even if I have to risk my life. Nie Dao roared in his heart, and his body began to tremble. He was the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, but he was also a father. Back then, because of the matter of the godfiend essence embryo, Nie Dao had arranged a battle with the leader of the Sacred Alliance, God Calamity. Unfortunately, he lost to the latter. In the end, in order to protect the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Dao could only hand over Nie Fenghua. Fenghua, I couldn't protect you back then. I'm ashamed to be a father. Today, even if I die, I won't let anything happen to your son. Nie Dao said solemnly. His eyes revealed a terrifying determination and even contained a strong murderous intent. If God Calamity dared to touch Nie Tian, then it would be time for the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Holy Parliament to fight to the death. Because of the awakening of the godfiend origin embryo, the Holy Parliament and the Wind and Cloud Alliance, the two peak forces, finally stood on opposite sides. Both sides were like arrows on a bowstring. If either side made the first move, it would lead to an earth-shattering war. The Holy Parliament and the Wind and Cloud Alliance were two giant beasts of the 9 domains. If they were to start a war, it would definitely be a war that would shake the heavens and earth. Of course, Nie Tian didn't know about these things. At the same time, in the plaza at the top floor of the Holy Parliament branch in Miu City of the Divine Husbandry Domain, Nie Tian's figure stood in midair, and his expression was one of astonishment. With the awakening of the godfiend origin embryo, his strength had successfully advanced to the peak of the lower god stage. His aura had become even more powerful. Where's the glazed demon pagoda? Nie Tian calmed down a little, and couldn't help but be stunned when he saw that the glazed demon pagoda had disappeared. He had no idea that the glazed demon pagoda had already been devoured by the godfiend power. Rushi. Share. In the next moment, Nie Tian suddenly saw Mo Rushi and the others fainted on the ground. He let out a cry and landed beside them in a flash. He used his divine sense to examine them. After confirming that Mo Rushi and the others were fine and had only fainted temporarily, he was relieved. Strange, why did they faint? Nie Tian looked around and found that Yang Wu, Xueman Shuang, and the others had also fainted on the ground. He couldn't help but smile with a puzzled expression. Little Nie, they fainted because of your god-fiend origin embryo, Sakura suddenly said with a speechless expression. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and finally recalled something. He suddenly raised his head and exclaimed, "So, the glazed demon pagoda was devoured by the god-fiend origin embryo?" "Yes." Sakura nodded and said, "The glazed chi is a good thing. Quickly, see how much of your god-fiend power has been awakened." Nie Tian swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The glazed demon pagoda was incomparably mysterious. He thought that he could set foot on the 9th floor and above, but who knew that it would be devoured by the god-fiend origin embryo? Nie Tian let out a long breath and forced himself to calm down. His divine sense entered the space of the god-fiend origin embryo. The space inside the god-fiend origin embryo was completely filled with surging god-fiend power, like an ocean of god-fiend power. With a thought, Nie Tian felt 2 strands of god-fiend power, and he could control them at will. 9,000 god-fiend power, and I only awakened 2 strands? Nie Tian was stunned and speechless. The god-fiend origin embryo contained 9,000 god-fiend power, but Nie Tian had only awakened 2 strands of god-fiend power. Nie Tian, don't underestimate these 2 strands of god-fiend power. According to my estimation, these 2 strands of god-fiend power are enough to kill an early-stage or even mid-stage god-fiend. Sakura smiled and said with a complacent expression. So terrifying! Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but reveal a joyful expression. Chapter 15-14. The god-fiend nascent embryo had just awakened and only awakened 2 strands of god-fiend energy. Yet, it was already enough for Nie Tian to instantly kill a middle god martial artist. One could see how terrifying the god-fiend energy was. 9,000 god-fiend energy. If all awakened, it would be absolutely heaven-defying. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled into a faint smile. He was very satisfied with the advancement in strength after awakening the god-fiend nascent embryo. At this moment, he was already at the peak of the lower god stage. There were even signs of him advancing to the middle god stage. This was an extremely terrifying advancement speed. One should know that it was extremely difficult for a god realm martial artist to advance to the peak of the lower god stage. It was no exaggeration to say that an ordinary martial artist would need at least hundreds of years to advance from the late stage of the lower god stage to the peak of the lower god stage. However, Nie Tian only used a few days. With such a comparison, one could imagine how terrifying the god-fiend nascent embryo was. What was even more terrifying was that with the awakening of the god-fiend nascent embryo, Nie Tian's future advancement speed would be extremely fast. It would absolutely be beyond imagination. Thinking of this, Nie Tian couldn't help but smile faintly with a face full of joy. However, he was still a little worried. The awakening of the god-fiend nascent embryo would definitely be noticed by many experts. Would these people harm him? Moreover, he also didn't know how the awakening of the god-fiend nascent embryo would affect the evil energy in his blood. It's useless to worry too much at this time. What will come can't be stopped. Nie Tian sighed softly and continued to examine his body. Glazed demon pagoda. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly discovered that the glazed demon pagoda was actually suspended in midair within the nascent embryo's space. It was slowly releasing glaze energy. Nie Tian was stunned by the scene in front of him. He didn't expect that the glazed demon pagoda would actually run into the god-fiend nascent embryo. So strange. Sakura also saw the glazed demon pagoda at this time. Immediately, he seemed to have discovered something and said doubtfully, "The glaze energy seems to have some kind of effect on the god-fiend energy." While suppressing the god-fiend energy, it actually caused some subtle changes to the god-fiend energy. Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He released the holographic divine runes and slowly sensed the surging energy around him. The colored glass chi slowly seeped into the fiend god sea. It actually had a very strong suppressive force on the fiend god power. At the same time, it slowly fused with the fiend god power. The colored glass chi circulated within the primal chaos whirlpool, releasing a very mysterious aura. While suppressing the power of the fiend god, the colored glaze chi also caused the fiend god's power to undergo some mysterious changes. As for what this change was, Nye Tian did not know. What a terrifying colored glass chi! Sensing this, Nye Tian could not help but frown. The power of gods and demons was very terrifying. It was indeed strange that the colored glaze chi could affect the power of gods and demons. Nye Tian, you've profited from misfortune this time. Suddenly, Sakura laughed loudly and said, the glaze chi suppresses the power of the fiend god and weakens the aura of the fiend god in your body. This way, other than peak paramount gods, it will be impossible for anyone else to sense the power of the fiend god. So that's how it is. Nye Tian suddenly realized and smiled happily. The colored glass chi blocked the aura of the fiend god, which was equivalent to setting up a protective barrier for Nye Tian. Even if others tried to sense the space of the nascent embryo, they would first sense the colored glass chi, not the aura of the fiend god. Very good. Excitement burned in Nye Tian's eyes, and he immediately relaxed. Then, after confirming that there were no other abnormalities, Nye Tian took a step forward and woke Emo Rushi and the others up. Nye Tian, are you alright? Emo Rushi called out nervously when she saw Nye Tian. Nye Tian smiled faintly, indicating that he was fine. Emo Rushi and Cher looked at each other, not knowing what had just happened. At this time, Yang Wu and the others also woke up. What happened? Yang Wu's first reaction was to look at the sky, but he only saw the glazed demon pagoda, and the other one was nowhere to be seen. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Where's the glazed demon pagoda?" Shui Man's Huang was also stunned, and he subconsciously shook his head. He only remembered that the glazed demon pagoda released a terrifying power, and then he lost consciousness. As for what happened after that, he had no idea. Everyone else woke up as if they had just woken up from a dream, and they looked at each other in confusion. "Kid, what did you do to the glazed demon pagoda?" At this time, Shui Man's Huang seemed to have discovered something, and he suddenly roared, releasing his aura, and was about to attack Nye Tian. But just as his Yuan meridians were operating, his body trembled, and he took a few steps back, coughing up a mouthful of blood. His face instantly became as pale as paper, and he almost couldn't stand. How is this possible? Shui Man's Huang was stunned, and when he looked inside his body, he found that his 9 Yuan meridians were injured, and even showed signs of collapsing. Moron! At the same time, Sakura Heaven's voice rang out, full of disdain and cold. Your Yuan meridians have been injured by the devil god energy, and you still want to attack? You're courting death. When the devil god nascent embryo had awakened, everyone present had received a huge impact on their Yuan meridians, and they had sustained serious injuries. Moreover, the stronger one was, the greater the impact. Shui Man's Huang was an early paramount god, and his Yuan meridians were seriously injured. Forcibly operating them was really courting death. Given his strength, injuries to his Yuan meridians should have healed in a few days. But his sudden activation of his Yuan meridians had worsened his injuries, and he wouldn't be able to recover for several months. Yang Wu frowned when he saw Shui Man's Huang suddenly coughing up blood. Looking inside his Yuan meridians, he immediately understood what had happened. The energy just now was too terrifying, and it had directly injured 2 paramount gods. Nye Tian, what's going on? Yang Wu asked. He could also sense the powerful glazed chi inside Nye Tian, as if he had absorbed the entire glazed demon pagoda. Elder Yang, I don't know what's going on either. Just now, I wanted to enter the 10th floor of the glazed demon pagoda. who knew that as soon as I stepped into the 10th floor, a beam of light would appear and enter my body. Then, the glazed demon pagoda disappeared. Nye Tian frowned and said seriously. Of course, he couldn't tell Yang Wu about the devil god nascent embryo, so he could only give a perfunctory answer. So that's what happened. Yang Wu's face darkened and he murmured, "No one has ever entered the 10th floor of the glazed demon pagoda. Could it be that entering the 10th floor will trigger some kind of mechanism? Elder Yang, the glazed demon pagoda is gone. Will I be alright?" Nye Tian was stunned. He didn't expect Yang Wu to believe his nonsense. He couldn't help but ask. How could he know that Yang Wu was helping him find an excuse to cover up this matter? Yang Wu was smart, so how could he be fooled so easily? "This matter isn't your fault. I will report everything to the Holy Assembly." Yang Wu nodded solemnly. His face was solemn, but he was secretly delighted. He could tell that the glazed demon pagoda didn't disappear, but was directly absorbed by Nye Tian. Originally, being able to enter the glazed demon pagoda and absorb some glazed qi was already a great thing for a martial artist. However, Nye Tian had directly absorbed the glazed demon pagoda. This was too terrifying. Yang Wu had already confirmed Nye Tian's identity. Of course, he was happy for Nye Tian. Chapter 15:15. Thank you, Elder Yang. Nye Tian looked at Yang Wu, slightly stunned, and then bowed to express his gratitude. He didn't expect Yang Wu's identity to be so easy to talk to. Little Nye, this Yang Wu isn't simple. I'm afraid he saw something but didn't say it. At this time, Sakura suddenly laughed strangely. Really? Nye Tian was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Why did he help me? Maybe he's an old friend of your father." Sakura laughed and guessed casually, then his figure disappeared. Nye Tian was stunned and looked at Yang Wu suspiciously. He murmured in his heart, "Does he really know my father?" Nye Tian definitely didn't expect that Yang Wu not only knew his father, but was also his father's sworn brother and best friend. Everyone, today's matter ends here. Before the matter is investigated, no one is allowed to spread the news here. Yang Wu's gaze swept across the crowd and said solemnly. His eyes were filled with deterrence. It was obvious that he didn't want this matter to spread. Yes. Duke Heartbroken and the other two holy judges bowed deeply and responded respectfully. In fact, anyone with a little bit of intelligence could see that Yang Wu was obviously covering up for Nye Tian. The disappearance of the glazed demon pagoda was definitely related to Nye Tian. Elder Shui, let's leave first. Yang Wu turned to look at Shuiman Shuang and smiled faintly. Shuiman Shuang looked embarrassed and glared at Nye Tian hatefully. How could he not see that Nye Tian had swallowed the glazed demon pagoda? However, he was seriously injured at the moment. If he fought, he might not be a match for Nye Tian. The muscles on Shuiman Shuang's face twitched, but he could only leave in the end. Yang Wu and Shuiman Shuang left. The two had recorded the results of Nye Tian and the others entering the glazed demon pagoda and would report it to the Holy Parliament later. As for who was qualified to enter the Holy Parliament, it would be known soon. At this time, Chen Wuqing looked at Nye Tian and frowned as if he was thinking about something. In the glazed demon pagoda, he could only reach the 6th level, but Nye Tian easily reached the 9th level and almost entered the 10th level. With such a comparison, the difference in talent between him and Nye Tian was very obvious. However, the way Chen Wuqing looked at Nye Tian was not resentful. Instead, he was grateful. It was Nye Tian who forced out the innate protection in his body, allowing him to see his mother. Even now, when he recalled the disappointment in his mother's eyes, his heart still ached as if it was being cut by a knife. "My son shouldn't be like this." This sentence was like a steel needle, deeply piercing Chen Wuqing's heart, making him feel deep regret. After thinking for a long time, Chen Wuqing finally took a step forward and stood in front of Nye Tian. He looked at Nye Tian deeply and said, "Nye Tian, thank you." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Chen Wuqing, you have a good mother. I hope you won't let her down. Chen Wuqing was touched. His eyes became firm and said, I have let my mother down once. I won't let her down again. Nie Tian smiled. Chen Wuqing was talented. If he could turn over a new leaf, he would have a chance to become a God realm peak existence. The others were stunned when they saw this scene. Before entering the glazed demon pagoda, Nie Tian and Chen Wuqing were enemies. Why did they shake hands and make up now? Chen Wuqing, it's time for us to go. Jiang Baoyu frowned and shouted coldly with a gloomy face. Nie Tian, I will leave first. Chen Wuqing smiled and said goodbye to Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. He then looked at Jiang Baoyu. He guessed that Chen Wuqing hated him so much because of Jiang Baoyu's instigation. There seemed to be a deep hatred between Jiang Baoyu and Heartbroken Young Master, so she also hated Nie Tian. Jiang Baoyu left with Chen Wuqing and Hu Zhongling. Only Heartbroken Young Master, Nie Wushang, and the others were left. Nie Wushang looked at Nie Tian and thought for a long time. He seemed to have something to say, but after hesitating for a long time, he didn't say it. He had guessed Nie Tian's identity, but he had to go back and inform the higher-ups of Wind and Cloud Alliance. Right now, he and Nie Tian were only strangers. It was not appropriate for him to say anything. Nie Wushang said goodbye to Heartbroken Young Master and left with Gongsun Baoyue and Situ Qian. Nie Tian. Heartbroken Young Master looked at Nie Tian with a complicated expression. There were too many doubts in his heart, but he didn't know what to say. Nie Tian shocked him too much. He vaguely felt that Nie Tian must be hiding a shocking secret. Lord Holy Judgment, is there anything else? Nie Tian looked at Heartbroken Young Master and asked after being stunned for a while. The test of the glazed demon pagoda had already ended. Nie Tian was thinking about the Origin Earthstone. He really wanted to see what the Origin Earthstone was that even the Heaven and Earthnet and the Crimson Moon Edge were so interested in. There's nothing else. Heartbroken Young Master shook his head and said, The reward of the Divine Palace competition will arrive in 3 days. During this period we just have to wait. 3 more days. Nie Tian frowned and smiled helplessly. Then let's wait. Then, Heartbroken Young Master left the square with Nie Tian and the others and soon arrived at the conference hall. Before arriving at the hall, Nie Tian could feel the violent killing intent from afar. He couldn't help but frown. Heartbroken Young Master also sensed something. He moved and arrived at the hall on the first floor. Bang! At this moment, a muffled sound was heard. Then, a bloody figure flew out and smashed heavily on the stone pillar of the hall. After landing on the ground, he was dying. Gongsun Baoyue. Nie Tian saw the bloody figure clearly. It was none other than the leader of Spirit God territory, Gongsun Baoyue. Is this the leader of the lower 3 realms? Can't even withstand a single blow. The next moment, a violent voice resounded in the hall. It was extremely ear-piercing. Above the hall, a murderous figure stood there. His eyes were red, and his whole body was releasing a violent aura like a man-eating beast. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. This person was really bold. He actually dared to openly attack in the Holy Assembly. How arrogant! Such a useless person is simply an insult to the title of leader. I'll cripple you now. That person seriously injured Gongsun Baoyue in one move, but he refused to stop. With a deep roar, his figure soared into the sky and punched down violently. He wanted to kill Gongsun Baoyue directly. Stop! Nie Wushang growled. He wanted to intervene, but his body trembled and then he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Just like Shui Man's Huang, he had also suffered from the impact of the Fiend God's energy. His Yuan meridians were badly injured. At this moment, that violent figure crazily pressed down, and the mighty shadow of his fist rumbled down. If this punch hit Gongsun Baoyue, the latter would definitely die. Don't kill. At this critical moment, Chen Wuqing roared furiously. Then, he leaped up and stood between Gongsun Baoyue and that person. Then, he forcefully struck out with his palm. Bang! In midair, the fist and the palm collided, causing a loud explosion. However, Chen Wuqing was no match for that person. He was directly blasted away and smashed heavily on the bluestone floor. His whole body was instantly drenched in blood. Chen Wuqing. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian frowned. Then, he leaped up and landed in the hall. His eyes were gloomy as he looked at the violent figure in front of him. This person wasn't strong. Just like Chen Wuqing, he was only an early-stage mid-god. However, the fact that he could seriously injure Chen Wuqing with a single punch showed how terrifying his talent was. Chapter 15-16. Dragon Vein. Nie Tian looked at the violent figure in front of him. His eyes darkened and he exclaimed inwardly. He did not expect that the person in front of him was someone with a dragon vein. This person was an early-stage mid-god with a dragon vein. It was normal for Chen Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue to be no match for him as they were injured. Chen Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue were also affected by the demonic and divine energy. Although they were not as heavily injured as Xueman's Huang and the others, they were still greatly hindered from displaying their strength. Get lost! Just as Nie Tian's figure was about to land, the rampaging figure saw that someone was standing in his way. He let out an enraged roar, and without even sparing Nie Tian a glance, he threw out a palm strike. Rolling palm force whizzed out towards Nie Tian. This person was obviously not a bloodthirsty person. He spared no effort in his attack, intending to kill Nie Tian on the spot. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He moved and struck out with his palm as well. Rumble! In midair, the two palms collided, causing the void to tremble. Surging waves of air gushed out, forcing both Nie Tian and that person to retreat. The two of them steadied themselves and looked at each other with different expressions. Nie Tian's brows were tightly knitted and his face was gloomy. On the other hand, that person was as violent as fire. His eyes were bloodthirsty and his entire body was surging with terrifying killing intent. This person clearly did not expect that a low god would be able to block his attack. Brat, who are you? That person's eyes were gloomy and he asked cold. Chen Wuqing, Gongsun Baoyue, are you alright? Nie Tian ignored him and turned to look at Chen Wuqing and Gongsun Baoyue. I'm fine. Chen Wuqing stood up and glared fiercely at that person. If his Yuan meridians weren't affected by the demonic and divine energy, he might have been a match for this person. Gongsun Baoyue also stood up. Although his face was pale, his life was not in danger. Brat, this young master is talking to you. Seeing that Nie Tian was ignoring him, that person angrily roared, his expression even colder. Nie Tian continued to ignore him. He turned to look at the heartbroken young master and said calmly, Lord Holy Judge, let's go. Young master heartbroken nodded heavily. He was very satisfied with Nie Tian's reaction. It was best to ignore this fellow in front of him. This person was called Jiang Qi, and he was the madman of the Jiang family. His identity wasn't simple at all. He was a direct descendant of the Jiang family, one of the 9 great families of the world creation era. If not for this identity, Jiang Qi would not have dared to act so arrogantly in the Holy Parliament. More importantly, Jiang Qi's grandfather was an elder of the Holy Parliament, so when he acted in the Holy Parliament, the hidden guards of the Holy Parliament did not come out to stop him. At this moment, a white-robed middle-aged man stood beside Jiang Qi. His appearance was handsome, but there was a sinister air about him. Jiang Yulong, why is he here? The heartbroken prince glanced at the white-robed man and was slightly taken aback. Without thinking too much, he turned around and prepared to leave. You Jiuxiao, do you want to leave with them just like that? However, at this moment, Jiang Yulong spoke coldly. His voice was very thin and sharp, giving people an extremely ear-piercing feeling. Brother Jiang, are you trying to stop us? The heartbroken prince frowned slightly. He was very curious why Jiang Yulong would appear here. The Jiang family was one of the 9 great families of the world creation era, and the 9 great families were all entrenched in the God Prohibition region of the upper realm. They rarely came to the 3 middle realms. Jiang Yulong's status in the Jiang family was not low, and he even had a chance to compete for the position of the patriarch. Such a person suddenly appeared in the God-shepherding territory, and even in the Holy Parliament. It was really puzzling. Humph, Jiang Yulong sneered. Then, he locked his gaze on Ye Tian and smiled strangely. He said, "Little brother, you must be the inferior god chief of the god-stunning territory. Although you only have the strength of a peak inferior god, you can fight against a mid-god. Not bad indeed." As he spoke, Jiang Yulong's eyes revealed a hint of admiration. He changed the topic and said, "Nie Tian, are you interested in joining the Xingtian alliance?" Nie Tian. Jiang Yulong directly called out Nie Tian's name without any hesitation. Nie Tian did not know Jiang Yulong, and he had never mentioned his name. The others also did not mention his name, so how did Jiang Yulong know his name? Moreover, Jiang Yulong seemed to be a very shrewd person. Now that he directly called out Nie Tian's name, it was obviously not a slip of the tongue. It was more like a hint and a threat. It was equivalent to directly telling Nie Tian that he already knew Nie Tian's identity, and that he had come for Nie Tian. As soon as Jiang Yulong's voice fell, the others were stunned, and their expressions became strange. Because Jiang Yulong mentioned a name, the Xingtian Alliance. The Xingtian Alliance was an organization established by the Jiang family. Together with the Wind and Cloud Alliance, they were known as the 2 strongest alliances. It was a powerful force that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Holy Parliament. The Wind and Cloud Nie family and the Xingtian Jiang family were the 2 strongest families of the 9 great families of the world creation era. The Xingtian alliance was such an enormous force, yet Jiang Yulong actually took the initiative to invite Nie Tian to join. This was very strange. Everyone knew that it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for those who did not have the surname Jiang to join the Xingtian alliance, unless one's strength had reached an extremely high level. Why would Jiang Yulong specifically invite a low god like Nie Tian to join the Xingtian alliance? Even if Nie Tian was very talented and had great potential, he was not an expert after all. The most puzzling thing was that Jiang Yulong seemed to have just met Nie Tian. At this moment, everyone's gaze fell on Nie Tian, waiting for the latter's reply. Xingtian alliance? Nie Tian was slightly stunned, but he immediately laughed and said, "Not interested." As soon as his indifferent voice fell, everyone present was stunned again. Obviously, they did not expect that Nie Tian would refuse so bluntly. Jiang Yulong's face darkened, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He said in a deep voice, "Nie Tian, you are a smart person. I can give you another chance. Are you interested in joining the Xingtian alliance?" Another hint, another threat. Jiang Yulong came for Nie Tian. "Not interested," Nie Tianling replied coldly. Not wanting to waste any more time, he turned around and prepared to leave. "Idiot!" Jiang Yulong's expression changed, and he shouted in a deep voice. "Stinking brat, you are courting death." Almost at the same time, Jiang Qi roared angrily. His figure was like a wolf, and he directly struck out with his palm towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian felt the cold wind from the palm behind him. His gaze focused slightly, and he directly turned around and slashed with his sword. A mighty sword shadow suddenly exploded out, and the sword light shot out thousands of meters. Rumble! With a loud sound, Nie Tian's sword directly shattered Jiang Qi's attack. The sword's shadow was like a mountain, and it smashed towards Jiang Qi. Bang! In the next moment, with a muffled sound, Jiang Qi's figure directly flew out, leaving a trail of blood in the air. When he landed, he was in an extremely sorry state. Hiss! Seeing this scene, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They did not expect that the power of Nie Tian's sword would be so domineering. Chapter 15-17. Impossible! Jiang Qi roared in the main hall. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Nie Tian viciously. He was the top genius of the younger generation of the Jiang family. It was a great humiliation for him to be defeated by a lesser god from the lower realm in one move. He came to the Holy Assembly today to bully the leaders of the lower realm. Who knew that he would be the one being bullied instead? He couldn't accept the difference between heaven and hell. Don't force me to kill. Nie Tianling looked at Jiang Qi coldly with a gloomy face. If Jiang Qi dared to attack again, he would definitely kill him. Seeing this scene, heartbroken young master couldn't help but feel nervous. With his understanding of Nie Tian, the latter would really kill Jiang Qi. Jiang Qi was nothing to the Jiang family, but his identity was extraordinary. If Nie Tian killed him, it was equivalent to offending the entire Xingtian alliance. The others were also nervous. If Nie Tian killed Jiang Qi, it would be big trouble. Jiang Yulong, did you bring Jiang Qi to the Holy Assembly just to let him kill someone? Heartbroken young master stepped forward and roared. How could he not see that Jiang Yulong was using Jiang Qi as a killing tool? To deal with a martial artist like Nie Tian, it would be beneath his status if Jiang Yulong did it himself. It would be much easier if he brought Jiang Qi. More importantly, Jiang Qi's grandfather was an elder of the Holy Assembly. Even if he made a move in the Holy Assembly, the hidden guards wouldn't interfere. You Jiuxiao, why are you so nervous? Isn't it normal for juniors to exchange pointers? Jiang Yulong smiled faintly with a playful expression. Brat, I'm going to kill you. At this time, Jiang Qi was already furious. With a roar, his whole body released violent dragon energy that instantly filled the entire main hall. Such pure dragon energy! Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but tremble. He didn't expect the dragon vein in Jiang Qi's body to be so terrifying. It was almost no weaker than his supreme dragon vein. Dragon energy! Nie Wushang also exclaimed at this time. This brat of the Jiang family really has innate dragon vein. Innate dragon vein? Hearing these 4 words, Nie Tian suddenly froze. He was very clear that the innate dragon meridian was the symbol of the destined one. Could it be that Jiang Qi was fated one? Previously, Ni Jiaming had told Nie Tian that the destined one was not a single person, but an organization. Could it be that Jiang Qi was the same as Lin Yi, a fated one? Brat die! Jiang Qi roared in a cold voice. His eyes were filled with a strong killing intent. The dragon qi around his body was extremely dense, and a huge, ferocious dragon appeared behind him. It was at least 3,000 meters long, and the huge hall was filled with the shadow of the huge dragon. Nie Tian furrowed his brows as he glanced at Jiang Yulong. The corners of his lips curled up into a smile as his body trembled. Similarly, a majestic draconic qi gushed out from his body, forming a sea of reddish-gold lightning. Countless thunderous booms rang out, causing the entire hall to tremble. Supreme Dragon Vein! Jiang Yulong stared at the sea of lightning behind Nie Tian. His eyes suddenly blazed, and he exclaimed inwardly. He had come here for the Supreme Dragon Vein. I knew it! Nie Tian saw Jiang Yulong's reaction and his heart trembled. He had already understood what was going on. He had used the Supreme Dragon Vein to test Jiang Yulong's reaction. Now, he was very sure that Jiang Yulong had come for the Supreme Dragon Vein. Not many people knew that he had the Supreme Dragon Vein. The people of Anai had always been interested in the Supreme Dragon Vein. Could it be that Jiang Yulong was from Anai? Nie Tian was very curious as to how Jiang Yulong had found him. He had the reverse dragon bloodstone, which could shield him from the draconic qi. You also have a dragon vein? Jiang Qi looked at the sea of draconic qi behind Nie Tian. His eyes suddenly trembled, and he was very surprised. He had not expected that Nietian would have a dragon vein, and from the looks of it, Nietian's dragon vein was even stronger than his. Idiot! Nietian looked at Jiang Qi and sneered cold. He could already tell that Jiang Qi was a killing knife that Jiang Yulong had brought over. This Jiang Qi had been used, and he still did not know anything. If he was not an idiot, then what was he? Second uncle. At this time, Jiang Qi suddenly looked at Jiang Yulong and shouted, as if he was asking the latter. Yes. Jiang Yulong nodded his head, and his eyes were extremely cold. Brat, die for me. Jiang Qi immediately understood that Jiang Yulong wanted him to kill him. So, without hesitation, he roared. The huge dragon behind him rolled out, and it directly broke several stone pillars. It roared and charged at Nietian. You are the one who insisted on seeking death. Don't blame me. Facing Jiang Qi's violent attack, Nietian's eyes turned cold, and a resolute killing intent surged in his eyes. Although Jiang Qi was only a killing knife, in order to intimidate Jiang Yulong, Nietian did not mind destroying this knife. From the fact that Jiang Qi wanted to kill Gongsun Baoyue and Chen Wuqing, he was a very ruthless person. He was the same type of person as Chen Wuqing. If this kind of person was allowed to live, who knew how many people he would kill? It was better to just kill him. With this thought in mind, Nietian smiled coldly. The dragon aura around him became violent, and a giant golden dragon appeared behind him. It threw its head back and let out a furious roar. Then, it rolled its body and dashed forward. The Parliament Hall was tens of thousands of meters long and wide, but in front of the two huge dragons, it seemed very small. Seeing the surging aura of the two, the crowd knew that the two of them were fighting to the death. Boom! Boom! The two huge dragons rolled and roared, and the space shook. Boom! In the next moment, the two dragons finally collided. With a loud sound, the space shook, and a frightening dragon-shaped wave of qi rolled out. The entire hall seemed like it was about to be overturned. At this moment, endless runes suddenly surged out of the hall, stabilizing the entire hall. This was the Parliament Hall's protective formation, and it could withstand the attack of an overgod. The moment the protective formation was activated, the aura of the two huge dragons immediately weakened. Roar! However, at this moment, a terrible dragon roar sounded. The huge dragon formed by Jiang Qi could not withstand the pressure of the formation, and its entire body began to shrink. Good chance. Seeing this, Nietian's eyes flashed. With a thought, the scarlet gold dragon roared out, and directly pressed towards Jiang Qi. In an instant, Jiang Qi felt the violent force pressing down on him. His eyes suddenly narrowed, and his expression became terrified. He shouted, "Second uncle, save me!" At this moment, Jiang Qi finally realized how terrifying Nietian's strength was. It was not something he could fight against. Nietian had devoured the glazed pagoda, and his martial body had become even more powerful. The glazed qi had made his sovereign dragon vein even more powerful. Now that it was released, it completely crushed Jiang Qi. Hearing Jiang Qi's cry for help, Jiang Yulong did not move at all. There was even a hint of a smile on his lip. Jiang Qi. On the other side, Jiang Baoyu shouted. He wanted to help, but unfortunately, his yuan meridian moved, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He had also suffered from the impact of the fiend god's power, and his yuan meridian was severely injured. He was a member of the Jiang family, and seeing that Jiang Qi was in danger, he obviously wanted to help, but he was not strong enough. Chapter 15-18. The tragic scene in the main hall caused the audience to fall into a deathly silence. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at Nietian, their faces filled with shock and horror. They were not shocked by Nietian's strength, but by the fact that Nietian actually killed Jiang Qi. Jiang Qi was not only a direct descendant of the Jiang family, but he also had a holy assembly elder grandfather. These two identities added together were extremely terrifying. Nie Tian killing Jiang Qi was equivalent to poking two giant hornets' nests at the same time. However, Nie Tian didn't care about this at all, his face was indifferent. But when he saw a sparkling and translucent godhead floating in the air, his face changed, exclaiming, "What is this?" He knew that this sparkling and translucent ball of light was Jiang Qi's godhead, but this godhead was different from other people's. It didn't release the pure aura of divine power, instead, it was rich dragon qi. The sparkling and translucent ball of light floated in the air, spinning rapidly, constantly releasing waves of pure dragon qi. It was very strange. Nie Tian's divine sense probed and found that there was not a trace of consciousness in the godhead. Jiang Qi was completely dead. He was very puzzled. With his strength, it was not enough to directly erase the divine sense in a godhead, so why was there no divine sense in Jiang Qi's godhead, only the purest dragon qi? Nie Tian's brows wrinkled tightly, his face filled with astonishment. Could it be that Jiang Qi's godhead is also a special godhead? Nie Tian guessed in his heart. He reached out slightly, directly taking the sparkling and translucent ball of light. The moment his hand touched it, Nie Tian felt an incomparably pure dragon qi flowing into his body, instantly restoring the dragon qi he had consumed. What a terrifying power! The sudden scene caught Nie Tian unprepared. His eyes trembled as he exclaimed in shock. This sparkling and translucent ball of light was too terrifying, it could actually instantly replenish dragon qi. Could this be the legendary dragon vein crystal core? Indra's voice suddenly sounding very surprised. Dragon vein crystal core? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, not knowing what Indra was talking about. The dragon vein crystal essence is a godhead unique to the dragon clan. It's also known as the dragon essence, and it contains the purest dragon qi. Shi Tian gave a simple explanation and said with a puzzled expression, "How can a human warrior have dragon vein crystal essence?" The dragon vein crystal essence was unique to the dragon clan. Even if Jiang Qi had an innate dragon vein, it was impossible for him to nurture the dragon vein crystal essence. Sakra thought hard, but he couldn't figure out what was going on. Qi. Right at this moment, Jiang Yulong seemed as if he'd awoken from a dream, and he suddenly let out a strange cry. He was extremely sorrowful, and he looked at Nie Tian with a shocked expression as he cried out loudly, "Little bastard, you killed him!" Nie Tian put away the dragon vein crystal yuan and looked cold at Jiang Yulong. He said directly, "Stop acting. You clearly had the chance to save him just now, but you coldly watched from the sidelines. Didn't you want Jiang Qi to die by my hands? It's hard for him to still call you second uncle, but you're a cruel and unscrupulous person, even scheming against your own nephew." How could Nie Tian not see through that if Jiang Yulong wanted to save Jiang Qi just now, he could stop him casually? But Jiang Yulong was indifferent and watched Jiang Qi die in Nie Tian's hands helplessly. He even hoped that Jiang Qi would die in Nie Tian's hands. Jiang Qi even called him second uncle just now. This kind of second uncle was simply worse than pigs and dogs. Jiang Yulong's gaze sank slightly. He did not think that Nie Tian was so astute, seeing through everything. But he was very puzzled. Since Nie Tian already saw through it, why did he still kill Jiang Qi? If Nie Tian could see through everything, how could the others possibly not see through? At this time, everyone's eyes when looking at Jiang Yulong changed. Even Jiang Baoyu, this Jiang family member, had a look of contempt. He did not think that Jiang Yulong was so ruthless, even scheming against his own people. Little B****, you killed my nephew. I want you to pay with your life. Jiang Yulong did not care about the others' reactions. He roared and took a step forward. His whole body's aura surged out and pressed down on Nie Tian. In an instant, Nie Tian felt a violent force pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. Jiang Yulong's strength was very strong, even more terrifying than the heartbroken young master. Nie Tian. Mo Rushi and the others cried out when they saw Nye Tian being controlled, but they were powerless to do anything. The heartbroken young master's Yuan meridians were injured, so he could not attack. Cher had the 3 lives meridians, so she was not affected by the demonic power. But her strength was too weak, so it was difficult for her to even get close to Jiang Yulong. What a ruthless second uncle! Didn't he make me kill Jiang Qi so that he would have a reason to kill me? Nye Tian endured the intense pain. His facial features were already distorted, and he looked like he was in extreme pain. Jiang Yulong watched Jiang Qi die tragically just to give him a reason to kill Nye Tian. This second uncle was really ruthless. Little B** starred, pay with your life. Jiang Yulong's eyes were gloomy as he spoke coldly. His eyes released a cold intent. He wanted to use his aura to pressure Nye Tian to death, but he discovered that Nye Tian's martial body was extremely tough. Even if he released his full strength, he still could not kill Nye Tian. Jiang Yulong could not imagine how a mere inferior god's martial body could be so tough. When he was a peak over god, he could instantly kill a peak intermediate god if he released all his aura. Even a weaker superior god would not be able to withstand it. Little did he know that there were too many heaven-defying things in Nye Tian's body. That was why his martial body could not be compared to ordinary cultivators. The Supreme Dragon Vein, the Star Origin Stone, the Supreme Twin Flames, the Demon and God Origin Embryo, and the Glazed Demon Pagoda. Any one of these things could improve a cultivator's martial body qualitatively. These 5 heaven-defying things were added to Nye Tian's body, allowing him to possess a martial body that was far superior to ordinary cultivators. Jiang Yulong, you are a senior cultivator who has been famous for a long time. Don't you feel ashamed to attack a junior in public? The heartbroken prince was enraged. His Yuan meridians moved, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. You Jiuxiao, this brat killed my nephew. As his second uncle, I shall take revenge for my nephew. What's wrong with that? Jiang Yulong laughed coldly. After that, he raised his palm, intending to make a move. The heartbroken prince's eyes trembled violently. He could not help but look around, hoping that the secret guards of the Holy Assembly would help. Unfortunately, the surroundings were silent. There was no movement at all. Jiang Qi was dead. This matter had already become a big deal. Why would the secret guards get involved in this? Little brat, die. Jiang Yulong raised his hand. Without any hesitation, he directly struck with his palm. Rolling palm force gushed out, forceful and murderous. It pressed down on Nye Tian crazily. Jiang Yulong was an expert at the peak of the over-god level. He was 3 cultivation levels higher than Nye Tian. Nye Tian would definitely die if the palm fell. No! Mo Rushi, Cher, and the others screamed when they saw the situation. Their faces were filled with extreme fear. However, Jiang Yulong's palm fell mercilessly. At the moment of life and death, something unexpected happened. The people of the Jiang family are still so shameless. Just when Jiang Yulong's palm was about to fall, a vigorous voice suddenly sounded. Then, a figure descended. Violent aura was released from his body, blocking the fatal attack for Nye Tian. In the next moment, the figure landed in front of Nye Tian like a towering mountain. Chapter 1519. In the Great Hall, just as Nye Tian was about to die, an azure-clothed figure suddenly descended and blocked Jiang Yulong's fatal palm strike for him. Nye Tian couldn't help but tremble when he saw who it was. The newcomer looked to be in his 30s, and his aura was like a mountain. He stood there majestically, like the toughest iron wall. This person's appearance and back made Nye Tian recall something. A blurry figure appeared in his mind, but he couldn't see the face clearly. Who is this person? Why do I see a similar figure on him? Nye Tian frowned, puzzled. Lady Feiyu. At this time, Nye Wushang recognized Nye Feiyu and cried out in surprise. She was pleasantly surprised. He was a member of the Nye family, so of course he knew Nye Feiyu. Niefeiyu was one of the 12 Hall Masters of the Wind and Cloud Alliance. He was also the 6th son of the Wind and Cloud Alliance's leader, Niedao. His position in the Wind and Cloud Alliance was extremely high. His appearance here was inexplicable. Niefeiyu has also come. Could he have also come for Nietian? Young Master Heartbroken also knew Niefeiyu. This person was a legendary figure in the God-forbidding domain. He ranked first on the 9 regions over God ranking and was known as the strongest chief god. He was in existence invincible below the supreme god realm. Most terrifyingly, Niefeiyu was not even 10,000 years old. This was an extremely young age for an overgod. Many people in the 9 realms were certain that Niefeiyu would become the next Niefenghua, a legend who had stepped into the paramount god realm before the age of 10,000. In the endless history of the 9 major realms, there were only a handful of people who had reached the highest realm before the age of 10,000. Niefenghua was one of them. Now, Niefeiyu also had high hopes of becoming a legend. It was rare for 2 legendary-level figures to appear in the Wind and Cloud Alliance at the same time. If nothing had happened to Niefenghua back then, the Wind and Cloud Alliance might have become the strongest existence in the 9 realms in a few hundred or even a few thousand years. One had to know that Niefenghua alone had allowed the Wind and Rain Alliance to surpass the Holy Parliament and the Xingtian Alliance. After Niefenghua's incident, the Wind and Cloud Alliance had restrained themselves quite a bit, but they were still a colossal existence. It was very strange for someone of Niefeiyu's status to suddenly appear in the God-shepherding domain. Niefeiyu, I didn't expect you to appear here. Jiang Yulong frowned slightly and suddenly looked at Nietian. He seemed to have thought of something and his eyes became strange. Niefeiyu's eyes darkened. He suddenly glanced at Nietian behind him, his eyes fiercely trembling. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but in the end, he held himself back. The Wind and Cloud Alliance Master had told him not to look for Nietian, but he couldn't hold himself back and came here. The moment he saw Nietian, he was convinced that Nietian was the son of his elder brother, Niefenghua. However, he did not dare to acknowledge Nietian. If he acknowledged Nietian now, it would be the same as announcing to the people of the 9 realms that Nietian was the fiend god nascent embryo. That would only put Nietian in more danger. At this time, the upper echelons of the Holy Parliament might already know of Nietian's existence. However, before they made a move, how could Niefeiyu take the initiative to expose Nietian's identity? I came to look for Niewushang. Is there a problem? Niefeiyu finally resisted the impulse in his heart. He looked at Jiang Yulong with a murderous gaze and spoke coldly. He did not know what grudges there were between Jiang Yulong and Nietian, but he clearly saw that Jiang Yulong had wanted to kill Nietian just now. If he had come a moment later, Nietian would probably already be dead. Humph! Jiang Yulong sneered and laughed sinisterly. Since you came to look for Niewushang, he is here. You can leave. How could he not see that Niefeiyu had obviously come for Nietian? Coming to look for Niewushang was clearly a cover. At this moment, Jiang Yulong had a different idea. He originally only knew that Nietian possessed the supreme dragon vein, but he did not expect that Nietian would be able to draw out a big shot like Niefeiyu. Could Nietian be a child of the Nie clan? Looking at Niefeiyu's attitude toward Nietian and his love for Nietian, Jiang Yulong became very curious about Nietian's real identity. A low god Nietian was actually able to attract Niefeiyu to come in person. It seems that Nietian is not an ordinary child of the Nie clan. Jiang Yulong sneered inwardly. The gaze he looked at Nietian became even more strange. Jiang Yulong, when I leave is none of your business, Niefeiyu replied coldly with a stern face. The corner of Jiang Yulong's mouth twitched. His eyes couldn't help but darken. He immediately said, I don't care if you want to stay here, but please don't interfere in my business. With that, Jiang Yulong suddenly looked at Nietian and took a step forward. He actually wanted to make another move. Jiang Yulong, you are a mighty peak overgod. Don't you feel ashamed to attack a junior in public? Nie Feiyu's body trembled slightly. He directly broke through Jiang Yulong's aura and spoke coldly. With him here, how could he let Jiang Yulong injure Nie Tian? Jiang Yulong's eyes narrowed slightly, and his lips curled into a strange smile. He said directly, Nie Feiyu, looks like you really did come for Nie Tian. This kid can't be your illegitimate child, right? Jiang Yulong said this completely jokingly. With Nie Feiyu's status, there was no need for him to have illegitimate children. He could marry as many women as he wanted, and he could have as many sons as he wanted. Moreover, everyone in the 9 realms knew that Nie Feiyu was a martial arts fanatic. He was completely obsessed with the martial way and had no interest in women. However, Jiang Yulong's joking words were not far off. Nie Tian was not Nie Feiyu's son, but Nie Feiyu's nephew. You're full of shit, you're courting death. Nie Feiyu's eyes darkened, and he suddenly took a step forward. An enormous aura was released from his body, and it actually forced Jiang Yulong to retreat again and again. The entire conference hall also began to sway. The conference hall could withstand the attacks of overgods, but Nie Feiyu was known as the strongest overgod. His true battle prowess was even greater than that of an ordinary early-stage paramount god. Jiang Yulong frowned. He wanted to resist, but that aura completely suppressed him, causing him to involuntarily retreat. Slap! Just as Jiang Yulong was continuously retreating, a sharp force suddenly descended and landed directly on his face. The crisp sound of a slap resounded throughout the hall, appearing extremely clear and bright. Jiang Yulong's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he felt his face swell and heat up. He directly roared, Nie Feiyu, you're going too far. He had never imagined that Nie Feiyu would actually dare to slap him in front of everyone. Although the redness on his face disappeared immediately, that crisp sound was like a steel needle, piercing Jiang Yulong's heart. He was a mighty peak overgod, but he had actually been slapped in front of everyone. How could he endure this kind of humiliation? The others were also stunned for a moment, looking at Nie Feiyu with astonished expressions, completely incredulous. Nie Feiyu's tyranny had exceeded everyone's expectations. Jiang Yulong, Jiang Lai didn't educate you well, so I'll help him educate you. This slap is to let you clearly see yourself. There are some people you can't touch. Nie Feiyu said coldly, his eyes filled with extreme anger. Jiang Yulong wanted to kill Nie Tian, so he naturally had to intimidate the former. If not for Jiang Yulong's special status, he would definitely have killed him. Chapter 1520. Jiang Lai, this name was not unfamiliar to Nie Tian. When the Sword Elder left, he had mentioned this name to Nie Tian. This person was the realm master of the God Sealing region, and also the Sword Elder's mortal enemy. It was this person who had imprisoned the Sword Elder and refined his soul into the artifact spirit of the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. How could Nie Tian not be surprised when Nie Feiyu mentioned the name Jiang Lai again? From Nie Feiyu's words, Jiang Lai seemed to be Jiang Yulong's father or some other elder. However, he did not know if the realm master Jiang Lai mentioned by the Sword Elder and the Jiang Lai mentioned by Nie Feiyu were the same person. Nie Feiyu, how dare you? Hearing Nie Feiyu mention the name Jiang Lai, Jiang Yulong was instantly enraged. He growled, "My father's name is not something you can casually say." As his roar rang out, Jiang Yulong slammed out with his palm. A massive palm force roared out like a tsunami, sweeping up the ground of the Parliament Hall. Countless stone pillars were instantly crushed into smithereens, and a loud bang rang out in the Parliament Hall. Even with the support of the Grand Defensive Formation, it was still unable to withstand the impact, and one side of the Parliament Hall collapsed. Jiang Lai was Jiang Yulong's father, and at the same time, the Alliance Master of the Xingtian Alliance. In the 9 major realms, he was a supreme existence on par with the Alliance Master and the Sacred Guild leader. Oh no! Seeing this scene, everyone's hearts tightened, their eyes filled with fear, and they all retreated. At that moment, the shadow guards hiding in the dark finally could not hold it in any longer. Over 10 figures in black robes appeared and unleashed their auras, forming a gigantic barrier that forcibly supported the collapsing Parliament Hall. Jiang Yulong, if you want to fight, then I will fight with you. Nie Feiyu's sword-like eyebrows furrowed, and with a wild laugh, his figure flashed. Like a hurricane, he directly swept everyone out of the conference hall. Bastard! Jiang Yulong roared, his figure flickering as he appeared outside the conference hall. His figure rushed out of the hall, and without waiting for Nie Feiyu to stabilize himself, he suddenly struck out with his palm, blasting towards Nie Tian. With me here, don't even think of harming a hair on him. When Nie Feiyu saw this, he roared and similarly struck out with his palm. 2 huge palm shadows collided in the void, causing a deafening explosion. The ground within a radius of several thousand meters was swept up, and the square outside the Parliament Hall was instantly turned into ruins. The collision between 2 peak overgods possessed unimaginable power. Nie Feiyu casually waved his hand, and a white light appeared, directly sending Nie Tian and the others into the distant sky. At the same time, his figure moved, leaping tens of thousands of meters into the sky. Jiang Yulong, if you have the guts, then come up and fight me. Nie Feiyu laughed coldly, his eyes looking down on Jiang Yulong, extremely arrogant. However, Jiang Yulong sneered. His figure moved, and like a stream of light, he actually charged towards Nie Tian. He knew that he was no match for Jiang Yulong, so he targeted Nie Tian. Despicable! Nie Feiyu frowned and struck out with his palm forcefully. A golden light appeared, filling half the sky. It was like a golden mountain, blocking Jiang Yulong's path. Jiang Yulong was blocked. He looked at Nie Feiyu viciously and roared Nie Feiyu coldly, Nie Feiyu, just what is your relationship with this kid? Why are you protecting him like this? I have nothing to do with him. I just can't stand your shamelessness. Nie Feiyu sneered and said loudly, Jiang Yulong, I'll give you a chance. If you can take a palm strike from me, I'll no longer protect Nie Tian. How about it? With that, Nie Feiyu's figure moved, and he arrived before Jiang Yulong. Cold disdain filled his eyes. A palm strike? Jiang Yulong's eyes flickered, and his lips curled into a vicious smile. He growled, Nie Feiyu, you're far too arrogant. Nie Feiyu and Jiang Yulong were both peak overgods. The former ranked first on the overgod ranking of the 9 regions, and was known as the strongest overgod. However, Jiang Yulong was also ranked 5th on the overgod ranking. He refused to believe that he could not even take a palm strike from Nie Feiyu with his strength. When the others heard Nie Feiyu's words, they all frowned and expressed their doubts. Nie Feiyu's strength was indeed above Jiang Yulong's, but it was a little too much to say that he could defeat Jiang Yulong with a single palm strike. The two of them had clashed just now. Although Nie Feiyu had the upper hand, it was not an overwhelming advantage. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. As he looked at Nie Feiyu in the distance, he actually sensed a very familiar aura. This aura was extremely similar to his demonic origin embryo, but it lacked the dark chi of the demonic and divine powers. Soul-sealing embryo. In the next moment, Nie Tian immediately understood. Nie Feiyu was the soul-sealing embryo. The demonic origin embryo was formed from the fusion of the soul-sealing embryo and the extreme demon embryo. Nie Tian was extremely familiar with the aura of the soul-sealing embryo. Since Nie Feiyu was bold enough to defeat Jiang Yulong with a single palm strike, he believed that he had enough strength. Nie Tian really wanted to see just how terrifying the legendary soul-sealing embryo was. Nie Feiyu, you and I are both peak overgods. You say that I can't take a palm strike from you? You're too arrogant. I'd like to see just how you're going to defeat me with a single palm strike. Jiang Yulong sneered, and a berserk aura spread out from his body. Like surging waves of air, the aura quickly condensed into a huge armored giant around him. It was over 10,000 meters tall and stood in the sky like the ruler of the world. What a terrifying aura! Nye Tian could not help but shudder when he sensed the armored giant's aura. With his strength, he still felt an almost suffocating pressure even when he was several tens of thousands of meters away. A peak over God was indeed terrifying. Nye Tian estimated that with Jiang Yulong's strength, a single palm strike from the armored giant was enough to destroy an entire mountain range. That's the heaven-punishing armor. To the side, Jiang Baoyu could not help but cry out when she saw the armored giant in the sky. She said loudly, "I never thought that Lord Yulong would actually be able to cultivate the heaven-punishing armor." The most terrifying aspect of the Jiang family of heaven-punishing was the heaven-punishing bloodline within them. This was one of the 4 supreme ancient bloodlines. When the power of the bloodline was released to the limit, the martial body could transform into the body of a heaven-punishing war god. Although Jiang Yulong's heaven-punishing armor was only an image, it was still extremely terrifying. The heaven-punishing bloodline of the Jiang family is just SOSO. In the sky, Nye Feiyu looked at Jiang Yulong and sneered. His eyes were filled with disdain. How arrogant! Sensing Nye Feiyu's disdain, Jiang Yulong was immediately enraged. With a deep roar, his body moved, and the heaven-punishing armor's giant hand fell down. It swept up the scattered clouds in the surroundings and rolled down. In an instant, the heavens and earth wailed, and the weather changed. It was like the end of the world. The countless people gathered below felt the destructive aura. Their gazes trembled violently as they were extremely shocked. In the sky, Nye Feiyu faced Jiang Yulong's full-powered attack, but he remained like a mountain. He stood in the air, and the energy channels in his body revolved madly. Violent auras were released, and a terrifying power surged in his body like the roar of a wild beast. Chapter 15:21. In the sky, Nye Feiyu struck out with his palm. The golden vortex turned into a streak of golden light that shot towards Jiang Yulong like a huge, sky-splitting sword. The moment the streak of golden light shot out, the space there trembled slightly. The world seemed to have been forcefully torn apart, producing a strange wail. What terrifying power! Nye Tian could not help but shudder when he saw this. He could not imagine that the power of a cultivator could actually reach such a terrifying level. The power of a peak over God was something he could not comprehend right now. The streak of golden light seemed to contain an extremely strange power that could fend off the world. How terrifying! At this moment, the heartbroken breaker and the others frowned as well. They were shocked. They were also overgods, so they could obviously see how terrifying Nye Feiyu was. It was very difficult to imagine that such terrifying power actually came from the hands of an overgod. Only now did the heartbroken breaker and the others understand how terrifying Nye Feiyu was. He definitely did not live up to his reputation as the strongest overgod. Boom! Crack! In the void, the golden light that was thousands of meters in size suddenly descended, landing on the Xingtian armor. The 10,000-meter-tall armor trembled slightly, and its gigantic figure suddenly swayed. After that, a loud cracking sound rang out, and a huge crack appeared on the Xingtian armor. In an instant, the crack spread out like a spider web, and directly exploded. Bang! In the next moment, there was a great rumble in the sky, and the heaven-punishing armor directly shattered. Arg! Jiang Yulong howled miserably, and his figure flew backwards. Like a kite with its string cut, he fell towards the ground extremely quickly. He left behind a bloody trail in the air, horrifying and eye-catching. Bang! Jiang Yulong smashed into the ground, and a huge crater appeared. Rocks flew everywhere, and the earth surged. One move. Just one move, and Nye Feiyu had directly defeated Jiang Yulong. Can't even withstand a single blow. Nye Feiyu stood in the sky and smiled coldly. As it turned out, he was the absolute ruler of this region of the sky. Why are you so powerful? Jiang Yulong stood up, his entire body dripping with blood. He struggled to raise his head to look at Niefeyu, his eyes filled with terror and shock. He had the same strength as Niefeyu, and he had condensed his strongest defensive move, the Xingtian armor, but he still couldn't block a single move from Niefeyu. This was unacceptable to him. He had originally thought that even if he couldn't injure Niefeyu with the heaven-punishing armor, he would have no problem protecting himself, but the result was completely different from what he had expected. Niefeyu's battle prowess far exceeded his expectations. It was not something he could contend with at all. What a scary person! When everyone on the ground saw this scene, their eyes trembled violently. Niefeyu was indeed too terrifying. He could completely crush Jiang Yulong, who was at the same level as him. After all, Jiang Yulong was also someone on the Overgod ranking, and he ranked in the top 5. Unfortunately, he was nothing before the most powerful Overgod. He could not even withstand a single blow. Everyone was shocked by Niefeyu's battle prowess, their expressions filled with terror. Niefeyu only had the strength of a peak Overgod. If he could become an Overgod, wouldn't he be heaven-defying? Niefeyu was indeed the descendant of Niefenghua. The Wind and Cloud Alliance had one super genius after another. It's not because I'm strong, but because you're too weak, Niefeyu said coldly. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked down on the world. At this moment, he was the ruler of this world, controlling everything. Niefeyu you. Pooh. Jiang Yulong's facial muscles twitched when he was mocked. He had just opened his mouth when his blood rushed to his heart, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Jiang Yulong, if you weren't a member of the Jiang family, you would already be a corpse, Niefeyu said coldly, his eyes filled with sharpness. This was the most direct form of contempt. It was very naked. Hiss! When the crowd heard Niefeyu's words, they could not help but gasp. It turned out that Niefeyu had not used his full strength in that move just now. With Niefeyu's temperament, there was naturally no need to lie. It seemed that his strength was even more terrifying than everyone had imagined. The power of the god-imprisoning fetus is indeed terrifying. Nie Tian looked at Niefeyu and his heart sank. The terror of the god-imprisoning fetus was beyond his imagination. The god-imprisoning fetus was already so terrifying, and the fiend god origin fetus was even more powerful. If the power of 9,000 fiend gods was completely awakened, the terror would be unimaginable. However, Nie Tian also discovered that when Niefeyu used the god-imprisoning fetus, there seemed to be a strange power within his body. It was as if the god-imprisoning fetus contained other powers besides the power of the god-imprisoning fetus. Nie Tian, let's go. At this time, Niefeyu's figure slowly descended. He looked at Nie Tian and spoke in a deep voice. He had some words to say to Nie Tian. Nie Tian was slightly taken aback. He was still not sure of Niefeyu's identity, but the latter gave him a very familiar feeling. Moreover, the bloodline connection made him certain that this person was someone very close to him by blood. A martial artist's perception was very strong. Even if it was a weak bloodline connection, they could still clearly feel it. Niefeyu was Nie Tian's biological uncle, and the suppression that Nie Tian's parents had left in his body had been broken. Of course, he could feel this bloodline connection. Nie Tian nodded. He glanced at the heartbroken young master and prepared to leave with Niefeyu. Boom! However, just as Nie Tian was about to leave, the void suddenly trembled, and a rift split open in the sky. Someone had actually broken through the void and entered this place. The spacetime of a domain realm was far more stable than that of a plane realm. The newcomer could actually directly break through the void. His strength was unimaginably terrifying. In the sky, a dark and boundless spacetime crack appeared, and a figure walked out from it. The moment that figure appeared, the world suddenly shook violently, as if it would collapse at any moment. At the same time, the crowd below felt a boundless pressure rolling down from the sky. Everyone felt a suffocating pressure. Many martial artists below the divine state were actually unable to withstand this enormous pressure. Their bodies trembled steadily and became distorted, as if they were going to collapse at any time. What a terrifying person! Nie Tian frowned slightly. He felt the blood in his body churning, and the power in his body seemed to be going out of control. This person released an aura of oppression from hundreds of thousands of meters in the sky. Even someone like him, who had a martial body comparable to a peak middle deity, could not withstand it. It was too terrifying. Nie Tian had never felt such a powerful aura. Among all the people he had seen, even Yi Qinghai and the demonic dragon Wang Minghui could not compare to this person. Perhaps only the inescapable Net's Earth Chief could barely contend against this person. Without a doubt, this person's strength was definitely at the peak of the god realm. Why would such a terrifying person appear here? Nie Feiyu sensed something and looked up at the newcomer. His eyes flashed with fear, and he exclaimed a name in his heart, Nangong Duxiu. Chapter 1522. Nangong Duxiu, why is he here? Nie Feiyu's heart sank when he saw that it was Nangong Duxiu. His expression changed. Did the Holy Parliament know of Nie Tian's existence? Nangong Duxiu was the vice president of the Holy Parliament. His status in the 9 major domains was extremely high, and his strength was terrifying. In the 9 major domains, the number of people that could defeat him could be counted on 2 hands. There could only be one reason for this person to appear here: God-fiend origin embryo. Everyone on the ground was stunned when they saw the figure in the sky. Although they didn't know Nangong Duxiu's identity, they could guess that she was a supreme expert that stood at the apex of the realm boundary from her aura alone. Such super experts usually did not show themselves. Many people would not even see them once in their entire lives. Many people felt extremely honored to have the opportunity to see the majesty of a peak expert. Young Master Heartbroken and the other holy adjudicators immediately recognized Nangong Duxiu. Their eyes shook violently. They did not know what had happened to cause Nangong Duxiu to appear. Nangong Duxiu's figure stood high in the sky. His sharp eyes swept across the crowd before landing on Nie Feiyu. He said solemnly, Nie Feiyu, you should not have appeared here. The god-fiend origin embryo was a taboo. The Holy President chose not to deal with it for now, while the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master chose to bide his time. The 2 giant beasts stared at the god-fiend origin embryo, maintaining a delicate balance like an arrow on a bowstring. Unfortunately, Nie Feiyu's appearance broke this tense balance and attracted Nangong Duxiu. President Nangong, I should not have appeared here, but should you? Nie Feiyu looked at Nangong Duxiu with a heavy gaze. Although his expression remained calm, his eyes could not conceal the panic. He faintly felt that something big was going to happen today. With Nangong Duxiu's appearance, it would not be easy to stop now. Nie Feiyu, you are still too young. Nangong Duxiu shook his head with a smile. His figure moved, and he charged straight at Nie Tian. Do not approach him. Nie Feiyu suddenly sensed something and roared. His body shone with golden radiance. His 9 yuan meridians revolved crazily, and his spirit restriction power was pushed to the extreme. It was even mixed with an extremely dense bloodline aura. Boom! In an instant, Nie Feiyu's body blossomed with golden radiance. It actually condensed into a huge golden sword that was tens of thousands of meters long. His figure moved and turned into a golden light shadow that blasted at Nangong Duxiu. The golden radiance flickered, illuminating half the sky. It was glaring and dazzling like a shooting star. Seeing the scene in the sky, the gazes of the crowd violently trembled. Only now did they realize exactly how monstrous Nie Feiyu was. At this moment, the combat power he displayed was several times, even dozens of times stronger than before. When Jiang Yulang saw the golden light in the sky, his eyes became dull. Only now did he truly understand how great the gap between him and Nie Feiyu was. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. A mere over-god dares to act so insolently before this guild leader? What a joke! Nangong Dushio revealed a look of disdain as she faced Nia Feiyu's full-powered attack. He casually slapped down with his palm, causing the void to shake violently. A boundless palm shadow fell down with a surging momentum, as if the world was collapsing. Peak paramount gods were so terrifying that they could cause heaven and earth to tremble and the wind to dim. Rumble! High up in the sky, under the watch of countless gazes, the golden light collided with the enormous palm. The heavens and earth trembled as a terrifying explosion resounded. It was like thunder from the 9 heavens, exploding without end. Chi-chi-chi. Terrifying and ear-piercing sounds rang out continuously. The golden radiance slowly weakened, and in the end, it was still no match for the enormous palm's vigorous power. Bang! In the next moment there was a muffled sound, and a blood-red figure fell from the sky like a meteor, drawing out a dazzling blood-red radiance. In the end, Nia Feiyu was still defeated by Nangong Dushio. The difference in strength between the two was too great, an entire major realm. This was a gap that no amount of talent or willpower could make up for. Lord Feiyu. When Nia Wushang saw Nia Feiyu being struck down by Nangong Dushio's palm, he couldn't help but cry out. He wanted to catch Nia Feiyu, but his figure trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Boom! At this moment, a figure soared into the sky, flashing with black flames. The wings were several hundred meters long, and with a sudden shake, it rushed in the direction of Nia Feiyu's fall. The person who appeared at this moment was none other than Nia Tian. His figure flew out quickly, and before Nia Feiyu fell to the ground, he caught him. Nia Tian. Nia Feiyu felt his rapidly falling figure suddenly stop, and then a warm current flowed into his body. He couldn't help but open his eyes, and when he saw a silver-haired face, he couldn't help but squeeze out a smile. He said in a deep voice, "Sixth uncle's strength isn't enough, so this is all I can do." Sixth uncle. Nia Tian's eyes suddenly shrank. So this man was his sixth uncle. No wonder he felt a strong blood relationship from Nia Feiyu, and no wonder Nia Feiyu risked his life to protect him. It turned out that Nia Feiyu was his sixth uncle. Don't speak. Nia Tian sensed that Nia Feiyu's aura was rapidly weakening, and he couldn't help but growl. Then, he released even more berserk origin power and poured it into Nia Feiyu's body. Waves of pure dragon energy, in addition to the powerful vitality of the universe's boundary and the power of the stars, finally stabilized Nia Feiyu's weak aura. Nia Tian let out a long breath of turbid air, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. His complexion also became as pale as paper. Feeling Nia Feiyu's strength at such a close distance, he could better understand that boundless power. Nia Feiyu's strength was already unimaginable to Nia Tian, but even so, he couldn't resist a palm from Nangong Dushio. A peak paramount god was truly a terrifying existence. Nia Tian suddenly raised his head and looked at Nangong Dushio. His eyes didn't reveal fear, but intense killing intent. He didn't know Nangong Dushio's identity, but she deserved to die for injuring Nia Feiyu. In the air, the surging waves dissipated after a long time, and Nangong Dushio's figure appeared with a strange look in his eyes. Although he had defeated Nia Feiyu with a palm and hadn't used his full strength, he was still shocked by Nia Feiyu's strength. He thought that if Nia Feiyu was a peak paramount god like him, he definitely wouldn't be Nia Feiyu's match. The Nia family's god-sealing fetus is truly terrifying, Nangong Dushio said with a heavy heart. He seemed to understand why the Sacred Assembly's president wanted to get rid of the god-sealing fetus back then. The god-sealing fetus was an even more terrifying existence than the god-sealing fetus. Once it matured, it would definitely become a heaven-defying expert. At that time, there would probably be no need for the Sacred Assembly to exist. Thinking of this, Nangong Dushio's eyes sank, and he looked at Nia Tian with killing intent. But the next moment, he suddenly sensed something and looked at the two people on the ground, Mo Rushi and Cher. Chapter 1523. In the void, Nangong Dushio's figure was like a killer. He sent out a palm strike towards Mo Rushi and Cher. Boom! The massive palm strike had a majestic aura that engulfed the world. Boundless power wreaked havoc in the world. A terrifying rumble came from the sky, as if the world was about to be destroyed. Rushi, Cher. Nie Tian was startled. He couldn't help but cry out when he saw the scene in the sky. He didn't expect that Nangong Dushio would suddenly attack Mo Rushi and Cher. Nangong Dushio was simply a madman. With his strength, this palm strike would not only kill Mo Rushi and Cher, but also the people around them. If Nangong Dushio's palm strike landed, it would kill tens of thousands of people. The crowd looked up at the huge palm descending from the sky. A violent force came crashing down, and many of the weaker cultivators were crushed into a bloody light on the spot. The Parliament Hall also collapsed and was instantly reduced to rubble. Boom! Boom! At that critical moment, two figures suddenly appeared behind Mo Rushi and Cher. They soared into the sky and two terrifying forces surged into the sky to meet the attack. Dragnet's secret guards. Nie Tian's eyes trembled and flickered with light. He immediately realized that it was the Dragnet's secret guards protecting Mo Rushi and Cher. These two secret guards had been protecting Mo Rushi and Cher all this time. Nie Tian hadn't noticed them at all. Nie Tian had been in danger many times, but these two had remained indifferent. Clearly, they only had one mission, and that was to protect Mo Rushi and Cher. As for whether Nie Tian was in danger or not, it was none of their business. "You're finally willing to come out?" Nangong Dushio sneered at the counterattack of the Dragnet's secret guards from high up in the sky. He could tell at a glance that there were experts protecting Mo Rushi and Cher. This palm strike wasn't to kill Mo Rushi and Cher, but to force out the people behind them. However, in order to force out these two secret guards, Nangong Dushio had killed thousands of innocent people. Perhaps in the eyes of a paramount god like him, these people were nothing more than ants, not even people. Boom! Boom! In the void there were two loud sounds. Under the terrifying collision, two figures directly fell from the building, and before they landed, they turned into two balls of bloody light. Nangong Dushio killed two net secret guards with a single palm strike. But his palm was also blocked by two dark guards who risked their lives. Both of them were early paramount gods, and their true fighting prowess was below that of Niefeu. When Nangong Dushio had attacked Niefeu, she had been afraid and had not used her full strength. But facing the hidden guards, he would not show mercy, so he killed two of them with a single palm. Mo Rushi and Cher were stunned. They didn't know that they had such a powerful protector by their side. At this moment, the crowd began to flee, leaving this space. Nangong Dushio stood in the air, looking down coldly like a god of death. In the next moment, his eyes were still locked onto Mo Rushi and Cher, and the killing intent in his eyes suddenly became more intense. He thought coldly, "I didn't expect these two little girls to have such a background. One is the Emperor of the Netherworld, and the other is even more terrifying. These two girls must die today." Nangong Dushio could see through Cher's true identity at a glance, but he was more afraid of Mo Rushi. In his opinion, Mo Rushi was even more terrifying than Cher. If Mo Rushi didn't die, she would become a thorny problem in the future. "The two guards are dead. It's your turn now." Nangong Dushio smiled cold, and without hesitation, he slapped down with his palm. Suddenly, a mountainous palm image appeared, blotting out the sun as it descended toward Mo Rushi and Cher. No. The sudden turn of events caused Nie Tian's entire body to tremble. His blood and chi surged madly, releasing boundless star power. Boundless primal chaos flame burned. At the same time, his dragon blood and fiend god power morphed into sharp black blades and whizzed out. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian had used all of his strength. Unfortunately, this power was too weak in front of a pinnacle paramount god. Nie Tian's figure blocked in the air, and he felt the violent power descending. The power around him was broken layer by layer, shattered, and dissipated in the air. The ultimate killing power was about to descend on Nie Tian, but at this moment something happened. Boom! A ball of golden radiance appeared in the void and turned into a huge golden shield that enveloped Nie Tian and the others. Bang! In the next moment, a terrifying sound echoed. The huge palm landed on the golden shield, but it was directly shattered and turned into waves of air that dissipated in the void. Nangong Dushio's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly raised his head to look at the sky. Wind and Cloud Alliance Master. When he saw the cold face in the sky, his eyes trembled and he cried out in surprise. High up in the sky, a green-clothed figure stood amidst the fierce wind. He was like a mountain, majestic and unclimbable. The person who came was none other than the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master, Nie Dao. Father, you finally came. Nie Feiyu stood shakily in the air. When he saw the figure clearly, his firm eyes couldn't help but become slightly moist. When Nie Tian heard Nie Feiyu's voice, his figure paused slightly, and his eyes that looked at Nie Dao flickered intensely. He is sixth uncle's father, which means he is my father's father. Isn't that my grandfather? Nie Tian exclaimed in his heart, and his expression changed slightly. Nie Dao's figure stood upright, and his expression was stern. His eyes were very complicated, and it was unknown what he was thinking. When he looked at Nie Tian, his aged face couldn't help but tremble, and his eyes seemed to be surging with warmth. His gaze did not stop for long, and he immediately looked at Mo Rushi and Cher, and his expression became even more astonished. But then, his gaze stopped on Mo Rushi, and he could no longer move away. His expression instantly became frightened, and he exclaimed in his heart, "This girl actually has a sage physique, and this is bad." Looking at Mo Rushi, Nie Dao's eyes flickered intensely, as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. His entire body couldn't help but tremble. A demon god nascent embryo was already very troublesome, and now there was another Mo Rushi. This made things even more complicated. When Nie Tian sensed Nie Dao's reaction, he couldn't help but be stunned, and his face was filled with doubt. He originally thought that Nie Dao would be surprised because of Cher's identity, but he didn't expect Nie Dao's gaze to be locked onto Mo Rushi. It was as if Nie Dao had discovered something on Mo Rushi's body, and it made him extremely frightened. Nie Tian couldn't understand. Could a sage physique be more terrifying than Cher, who possessed the three-life vein? Alliance Master Nie. At this moment, Nangong Dushio regained his calm, and he gloomily looked at Nie Dao and said, "You finally came." At this moment, Nangong Dushio was actually quite pleased with himself. He knew that even if Nie Dao appeared and protected Nie Tian, he might not be able to protect Mo Rushi and Cher. From the looks of it, Mo Rushi and Cher were even more terrifying than Nie Tian. Nie Dao's body suddenly trembled, but he ignored Nangong Dushio. Instead, he looked at another part of the void and said in a deep voice, "Nine Gods Calamity, since you're already here, come out." Nine Gods Calamity was the name of the sacred president. "Brother Nie, long time no see." At the next moment, the void slightly trembled, and a black-clothed figure appeared. He spoke in a deep voice that was illusory, as if it came from the void itself. It was extremely strange. Chapter 1524. High up in the sky, a black-clothed figure floated like an illusory phantom, giving off an extremely eerie feeling. President! Nangong Dushio could not help but be stunned when he saw this figure and exclaimed. He did not know that the sacred president had personally come. The Wind and Cloud Alliance Master and the sacred president, the two peak existences of the 9 major domains, had finally met. Who would have thought that a small city like Muyu City would welcome two supreme powerhouses who stood at the pinnacle? Nie Tian gazed at the two figures confronting each other high up in the sky, and deeply felt the vast and boundless strength between them. In his eyes, these two peak existences were like towering mountains, while he was just a speck of dust, pitifully insignificant. The Wind and Cloud Alliance Master and the Sacred President had finally met and faced off because of the awakening of the God-fiend origin embryo. The few people on the ground looked up at the two figures in the sky. Those were two huge peaks while they were just specks of dust on the ground. They were so inconspicuous. Hua Jiushin, you finally appeared. Nie Dao's figure was like a mountain as he stood tall in the sky. The space within 10,000 meters around him was surging with golden light, making him look like the son of the nine heavens, ready to unleash the most terrifying power at any time. Brother Nie, it's been more than 200 years. It's time for us to meet, Hua Jiushin said solemnly. His body was shrouded in darkness as if he was the darkness itself. His entire being was like an abyss that floated in the sky. As his deep voice fell, Hua Jiushin released a boundless and invisible pressure that spread in the sky. It was obvious that he wanted to drive everyone away. The crowd felt the suffocating pressure and could not bear it, so they quickly left. In the blink of an eye, everyone had left, leaving only a few figures. Feiyu, take Nie Tian and the others away. Nie Dao frowned when he saw this. He waved his hand and a golden light entered Nie Feiyu's body. The latter's pale complexion instantly turned for the better, and his strength recovered by more than half. Yes. Nie Feiyu answered and moved, wanting to take Nie Tian and the others away. The others can leave, but that brat Nie Tian and those two girls can't. However, just as Nie Feiyu moved, Hua Jiushin's voice suddenly rang out. Then, a strange power appeared, locking down the space around Nie Feiyu, Nie Tian, and the others, making them unable to move. What a terrifying power! Nie Tian could feel the space around him being locked down. He frowned and his expression changed. It's the 9 Yin pupils. At the same time, Sakura's voice rang out. No wonder this guy called Hua Jiushin is so terrifying. It turns out that he has the 6th other pupil, the 9 Yin pupil. 9 Yin pupil. Nie Tian's heart skipped a beat. He had heard of this strange pupil before. It was ranked 6th in the 10 great innate strange pupils. Rumor had it that it was even more terrifying than the 7th-ranked 9-colored pupil. Nie Tian knew all of the 10 great innate strange pupils, but he hadn't seen many of them. The most powerful one he had seen before was probably Rui Qianyu's 7th pupil, the 9-colored pupil. Now, it should be Hua Jiushin's 9 Yin pupil. Actually, the 9 Yin pupil and the 9-colored pupil were about the same in power. It was just that the 9 Yin pupil was the nemesis of the 9-colored pupil, which was why it was ranked ahead of the 9-colored pupil. Nie Tian didn't expect that the God State Peak expert in front of him would actually have the legendary 9 Yin pupil. Currently, Rui Qianyu's 9-colored pupil was far inferior to Hua Jiushin's 9 Yin pupil. However, this wasn't the difference between the two other pupils. It was the difference between Hua Jiushin and Rui Qianyu. When Rui Qianyu reached the God State Peak and fully opened the 9-colored pupil, she might not be weaker than Hua Jiushin. In front of Hua Jiushin's 9 Yin pupil, Nie Tian and the others couldn't fight back at all. Nie Dao frowned slightly when he saw Nie Feiyu and the others being controlled, but he wasn't in a hurry to act. Hua Jiushin wouldn't dare to kill before the two sides officially fell out. In the blink of an eye, everyone had left. The entire Muyu city had become an empty city. Only Hua Jiushin, Nie Dao, Nangong Duxiu, Nie Feiyu, Nie Tian, Mo Rushi, and Cher were left. Nie Qiu had also left temporarily. Hua Jiushin, what do you want? Just say it. Seeing that the unrelated people had left, Nie Dao looked at Hua Jiushin coldly and spoke in a deep voice. Hua Jiushin seemed to laugh. She actually let go of Nie Feiyu and the others, allowing them to flash behind Nie Dao. Alliance leader Nye, since the unrelated people have left, I won't waste any more time. Huajiushen's eerie voice rang out. The devil god nascent embryo can live, but the two girls with him must die. As soon as the word die was uttered, Huajiushen's entire body erupted with extreme coldness. The space within 10,000 meters of her was immediately locked down by a sinister power. Impossible, Nye Dao said in a deep voice. As long as I'm here, no one can hurt them. With that, Nye Dao waved his hand, sending out beams of golden light that enveloped Nye Tian, Mo Rushi, and Cher. Nye Dao was already a peak paramount god, so his god-sealing power was terrifying. Even the 9 Enai couldn't easily break through it. Grandfather! Nye Tian sensed a strong protective aura, causing his blood qi to surge uncontrollably, and his eyes to flicker violently. He could sense Nye Dao's determination, but the enemy he was facing was too terrifying. Huajiushen was definitely no weaker than Nye Dao. In fact, she might even be stronger than him. More than 200 years ago, Huajiushen and Nye Dao had fought. Nye Dao had been defeated and forced to give up his eldest son, Nye Fenghua. Now, 200 years later, would Nye Dao be a match for Huajiushen? Humph! Suddenly, Huajiushen laughed coldly. His laughter contained a sinister aura as he said solemnly, Nye Dao, don't you think you're too naive to think that you can protect the three of them? The devil god nascent embryo is a forbidden embryo. Letting it live is already the greatest concession I can make. As for that girl with the meridians of 3 lives, I'm sure you know better than me what her status is. Even if I allow her to live, do you think the other factions will? If you want to protect the meridians of 3 lives, you'll be making an enemy of all the factions in the 9 realms. Will the Heavenly Punisher Alliance, the Guiwu clan, the Yu clan, and the other aristocratic clans allow it? The extremely cold voice was like steel needles that fiercely pierced into Nye Dao's heart when he heard it. Nye Tian frowned. He didn't know who Cher was. Why was protecting Cher the same as making an enemy of all the factions in the 9 realms? Nye Dao's expression was grave, and his eyes flickered with determination. He seemed to be wavering a little. It was already difficult enough for him to protect Nye Tian. It would be too difficult to protect the meridians of 3 lives as well. There's another girl. She has the number 1 martial physique of all time, the body of a sage. Huajiushen's voice sounded again. Actually, the body of a sage isn't that big of a deal. The problem is that she chose the wrong man. That's why she can't live. Nye Tian's pupils shrank when he heard Huajiushen's words. What did she mean? Was it wrong for Mo Rushi to choose him? Just because of that, Mo Rushi had to die? Chapter 1525. Huajiushen's cold voice resounded through the air, causing the surrounding atmosphere to become deathly silent and oppressive. Nye Dao's expression was as gloomy as still water, as if he was thinking about something. At a certain moment, he saw Nye Tian's eyes, which were filled with pain and anger. This scene inexplicably caused his heart to tremble, and his entire body to tremble. This scene was so similar to the one from back then. Nye Tian's eyes were clearly the same as Nye Fenghua's eyes from back then. I can make a mistake once, but I definitely can't make a second mistake. Nye Dao's aged eyes suddenly trembled as a deep voice roared angrily in his heart. He had given up on Nye Fenghua back then, so he definitely wouldn't give up on Nye Tian now. The moment he thought of this, Nye Dao abruptly raised his head. His eyes became firm and stern, filled with determination. Huajiushen could sense the determination in Nye Dao's eyes, and his eyes couldn't help but sink. His incorporeal figure trembled slightly, and then he said coldly, Nye Dao, the devil god nascent embryo, the 3 lives meridian, and the body of a sage. Can you protect all of them? Nye Dao's eyes were resolute as he said loudly, I will protect them if I can, and even if I can't, I will protect them. This time, I definitely won't take even half a step back. As his thunderous roar fell, Nye Dao's body suddenly shook, and the golden light around his body exploded. His body was like a golden sun, blazing with incomparable intensity. Grandfather! Nye Tian felt a surge of warmth in his heart when he saw this. Ever since he was young, he had never known what family was. But at this moment, he felt a warmth that he had never felt before. It turned out that this grandfather he had never met actually loved him so much. Using one's life to protect one's family was what a martial artist should truly do. This time, Nye Dao wouldn't compromise even if he had to put his life on the line. Nye Dao, you're forcing my hand. Huajiushan growled, and his black body unleashed surging waves that surged in all directions. He clearly hadn't expected Nye Dao to be so resolute this time. Then let's fight. Nye Dao roared, and his body glowed with golden light. He suddenly raised his palm and violently thrust it out. Instantly, a golden palm image appeared. It was tens of thousands of meters in size, and it filled the sky. This guild leader isn't afraid of you. Huajiushan was also enraged. Her dark figure trembled slightly, and a black palm shadow whizzed out. An evil and violent aura filled the entire sky. The battle between the two supreme peak experts suddenly broke out. Nye Tian looked at the scene in the distant sky, and his eyes became dull. This kind of power was beyond his imagination, and he couldn't understand it at all. Boom! A thunderous boom resounded through the sky. The instant the two palms collided, a terrifying shockwave exploded from the center of the collision, spreading in all directions. Boom! Violent waves of air rushed into the sky, and a huge space-time gap appeared in the sky. It was tens of thousands of meters wide, and it released a terrifying space-time storm that engulfed everything. Even space itself was about to be devoured. At the same time, a terrifying airwave hit the ground, and the entire Muyu city was instantly enveloped by the airwave. Boom! Crack, crack, crack! The terrifying power contained within the airwave exploded, and the ground was forcibly torn apart. The entire Muyu city was instantly turned into a huge crater. After a long time, the endless airwave dissipated, and two figures stood tall in the sky, completely unharmed. Nye Tian and the others were protected by the God-sealing power, so they weren't injured either. When Nye Tian saw everything on the ground, he was completely dumbfounded. Muyu City was thousands of kilometers in circumference, but it had been turned into a huge crater in the blink of an eye. It was too terrifying. A battle between peak paramount gods had destroyed a huge city with a single move. Fortunately, the people of Muyu City had left early. Otherwise, at least millions of people would have died. Nye Dao and Huajiushan faced each other in the sky. Nye Dao, do you really want to fight to the death with me? Huajiushan's abyss-like figure swayed, and she said coldly, You can protect the fiend god nascent embryo. That's the most I can do. Huajiushan had defeated Nye Dao before, so she wasn't afraid of him. But if the two of them fought to the death, even if she could kill Nye Dao, she would have to pay a heavy price. In the end, both of them would suffer great losses. This wasn't an outcome Huajiushan wanted to see. Impossible! Nye Dao's figure was like a huge mountain, and his voice echoed through the sky. As long as I still have a breath left in me, don't even think about hurting my family. He knew about Nye Tian's relationship with Emo Rushi and Cher, so he treated them as family. He didn't care about Cher's relationship with the Emperor of the Netherworld. All he knew was that Cher was Nye Tian's wife, and that was enough. As for Emo Rushi, he had to protect her. Nye Dao, you're too stubborn. Huajiushan roared. She was clearly furious. But in the next moment, her figure swayed slightly, as if she'd discovered something. Nye Dao's eyes narrowed as he sensed something. He frowned, and his expression darkened. Lord President, Brother Nye, long time no see. In the next moment, the void trembled slightly, and a strange figure broke through the void and descended. The newcomer was a burly old man. His body was as thin as firewood, and he looked like a giant skeleton. However, His aura was extremely terrifying, and it wasn't any weaker than Hu Jiushan and Nye Dao. Another peak expert. Nye Tian frowned, and his expression suddenly changed. He didn't know if the newcomer was friend or foe. Nye Dao was already at a disadvantage, and there was also Nangong Duxiu watching from the side. If the newcomer was an enemy, then Nye Dao would be in great danger. Alliance Master Jiang, you've come at the right time. Hu Jiushan saw the newcomer's figure clearly, and actually laughed playfully. Nye Dao looked at the newcomer with a heavy gaze, but he didn't say anything. The newcomer was none other than the Alliance Master of the Xingtian Alliance, Jiang Lai. The Xingtian Alliance and the Wind and Cloud Alliance were known as the two strongest alliances. They were a powerful force that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Sacred Parliament, and their Alliance Master, Jiang Lai, was strong enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Sacred President and the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master. Once upon a time, the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Xingtian Alliance were the best of allies. Unfortunately, 200 years ago, when Ye Fenghua's matter happened, the Xingtian Alliance didn't stand up for Wind and Cloud Alliance. Instead, they stood against Wind and Cloud Alliance and supported the Sacred Parliament. Because of this, Nye Dao had no choice but to hand over Nye Fenghua in order to protect Wind and Cloud Alliance. From then on, Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Xingtian Alliance were no longer allies, but enemies who had yet to completely fall out with each other. Jiang Lai's arrival caused Nye Dao's heart to sink, and his old but resolute face immediately turned gloomy. It would be troublesome if Jiang Lai stood on Hu Jiushan's side again. And with Nye Dao's understanding of Jiang Lai, the latter would definitely support Hu Jiushan. The fiend god origin embryo has awakened, so of course I have to come and join in the fun. Jiang Lai glanced at the ground and smiled coldly. His gaze swept past Hu Jiushan and Nye Dao, and then landed on Nye Tian and the others in the distance. Alliance Master Jiang, take a good look. It's much more lively than you can imagine. Hu Jiushan smiled sinisterly, and her dark figure actually swayed a few times, as if she was very pleased with herself. The meridians of 3 lives, that girl actually possesses the Netherworld Emperor's bloodline. Jiang Lai's gaze swept past Cher, and then he cried out in surprise, unable to conceal the shock in his heart. Alliance Master Jiang, the Netherworld Emperor's bloodline isn't scary. What's even scarier is the other girl. Hu Jiushan smiled again, and the aura around her body surged, faintly revealing a skeletal face. It was strange and frightening. Jiang Lai frowned, and then his gaze locked onto Emo Rushi. He first laughed, but in the next moment, he seemed to have discovered something. His eyes flickered violently, and his entire body began to tremble, as if he had discovered something extremely frightening. His mouth opened wide, but not a single sound came out. Nye Tian frowned, and his gaze trembled when he saw that Jiang Lai's reaction wasn't right. Chapter 1526. Nye Tian's eyes flickered when he saw Jiang Lai's reaction. Jiang Lai was a peak paramount god, so what could he have sensed from Emo Rushi that made him so frightened? He couldn't think of anything that could make a peak paramount god so frightened. Nye Tian frowned. He was even more puzzled when he thought of how Nye Dao and Hu Jiushan were paying more attention to Emo Rushi. Nye Tian couldn't help but look at Emo Rushi. He sent his divine sense over, but didn't find anything out of the ordinary. Is there a secret on Rushi that I don't know? Nye Tian looked at Emo Rushi and wondered. Emo Rushi's eyes were evasive at this moment, as if she was thinking about something. There was indeed something she hadn't told Nye Tian because she didn't want Nye Tian to be distracted because of her. This girl must die. Just then, Xingtian Alliance Master Jiang Lai finally reacted. His old face instantly turned gloomy, and he let out a low roar. His eyes revealed an extremely cold killing intent. The intense killing intent was even stronger than when he saw Cher. He wanted nothing more than to kill Emo Rushi right now. Nye Tian's heart sank when he saw this, and his expression changed. What had Jiang Lai discovered that made him want to kill Emorushi? Don't even think about it. Jiang Lai hadn't even finished speaking when Ye Dao's thunderous roar resounded, and the god-restraining golden light on his body actually became even stronger. His robust figure suddenly took a step forward, causing the space around him to suddenly tremble. With me here, don't even think about harming a single one of them. His thunderous voice showed Nye Dao's determination. Even if he died today, he wouldn't take half a step back. Nye Dao. Huajiushan was stunned. He shouted Nye Dao's name word by word and said in a deep voice, "You overestimate yourself. It's impossible for you to stop me alone. If Alliance Master Xing Tian joins us, you won't stand a chance." Lord Guild Leader, Alliance Master Nye is a stubborn old man. There's no point in talking to him. Let's make our move. Jiang Lai said darkly, an intense killing intent radiating from between his brows. So what if the two of you join hands? I, Nye Dao, swear to protect my family with my life. Nye Dao's face was gloomy as he roared furiously. He knew that he was no match for Huajiushan and Jiang Lai, but now that things had come to this, he had no other choice. He had to fight to the end. Stubborn. Huajiushan sneered, and her abyss-like eyes flickered. A burst of evil energy gushed forth, transforming into a sharp black claw that lunged forward in a frenzy. Instantly, the entire sky became dim and filled with evil energy of extreme and the atmosphere was oppressive and deathly silent. You want to touch my family? Impossible! Nye Dao roared angrily, and his body glowed with golden light. The spirit's sealing power was unleashed in a frenzy, causing the world to tremble. Amidst the boundless light, a sharp golden blade whizzed out. It was like a sword that could slice apart heaven and earth, and it was extremely murderous. Rumble! In the void, the two boundless powers collided, and a terrifying shockwave was released. Space was directly torn apart, and an endless space-time storm surged out, devouring most of the power. The shockwave surged in all directions, and the earth was torn apart once more. A giant abyss was formed in an instant, and it was as if doomsday had arrived. In the sky, Huajiushan and Nye Dao hurriedly retreated, putting tens of thousands of meters between them. The clash between the 9 pupils and the spirit-sealing fetus made both of them somewhat fearful. Troublemaker, die. However, at this moment, an extremely cold voice rang out, and a figure crazily pressed down from the void. Jiang Lai had struck out with a palm, and his target was Emorushi. Rushi! Nye Tian cried out when he saw this. He wanted to act, but he discovered that he couldn't summon any strength at all. Under the pressure of Jiang Lai's aura, he didn't even have the chance to attack. Jiang Lai was a peak expert, but instead of fighting Nye Dao head-on, he actually attacked Nye Dao's back. How despicable! No. In the distant sky, Nye Dao cried out when he saw this shocking scene, and his eyes trembled in fear. He never thought that Jiang Lai would actually try to kill Emorushi. At this moment, he wanted to act, but it was too late. In the sky, Jiang Lai's aura surged wildly, and his eyes were filled with the most resolute killing intent. He roared in a frenzy, "The scourge of the god-fiend origin embryo and the sage body must not be allowed to live." Boom! As his violent voice fell, a sure-kill palm surged out and pressed down on Emorushi. At this moment, the spirit-sealing barrier that Nye Dao had left on Emorushi and the others had already weakened. If this palm landed, not only would Emorushi die, but Cher, who wasn't far away, would also die. The scourge of the god-fiend origin embryo and the sage body. In an instant, Jiang Lai's words reverberated in Nye Tian's mind. His eyes trembled violently, and he instantly understood something. All the blood in his body surged in an instant. At this moment, Nye Tian finally understood why 9 deities Hora and Jiang Lai were so afraid of Emorushi. It was because Emorushi was pregnant with Nye Tian's child. A sage body couldn't possibly attract so much attention from 9 deities Hua and Jiang Lai, but a sage body coupled with the godfiend origin embryo was terrifying enough. The godfiend origin embryo was already a taboo, and if it was combined with the power of a sage body, it was hard to imagine how terrifying this child would be. The child in Mo Rushi's womb was what 9 deities Hua and Jiang Lai were truly afraid of. They didn't want to kill Mo Rushi, but the unborn child in her womb. Mo Rushi hadn't had the time to tell Nie Tian about her pregnancy. She didn't want to distract Nie Tian, so she wanted to wait until Nie Tian obtained the origin Earth Stone before telling him. However, she didn't expect that Nie Tian's godfiend origin embryo would awaken and cause things to escalate to this stage. The child in Mo Rushi's womb was also one of the reasons why Nie Dao couldn't back down. That was the bloodline of the Nie family, so how could he allow an unborn child to be killed? The scourge of the devil fetus cannot be left alive. 9 deities Hua spoke coldly in the sky. His face that was hidden in the darkness gradually revealed itself. It was actually a black skull. From his point of view, no one could save Mo Rushi at this moment. You're not allowed to hurt them. Just as Jiang Lai's fatal palm landed, Nie Tian suddenly roared. His roar was so loud that it could pierce through the clouds and crack rocks, and a terrifying dragon's roar could be heard. At this moment, the blood energy in Nie Tian's body boiled violently. Waves of dark energy were released from his blood and instantly infused into the 9 dragon veins. Bang, bang, bang. Countless explosions sounded from within his body. The dragon vein seal was directly broken by the impact of the dark energy. Roar. Almost instantly, Nie Tian's body directly dragonized. A 3,000-meter-long scarlet gold dragon appeared in the sky. The dragon vein seal was formed by the powerful dragon energy that Nie Tian had obtained from the dragon coffin on the cliff wall. Up until now, the dragon vein seal had only been broken twice. The first time was when Nie Tian obtained the dragon vein seal, and the second time was when he fused with the dual meridians. But this time, in his extreme rage, the dark evil energy within his body exploded and forcefully broke the seal on the dragon vein. Chapter 1527. Roar! An earth-shattering dragon roar reverberated in the sky as the crimson golden dragon tumbled out of the void. Like a giant shield, it stood in front of Mo Rushi and Cher. Bang! In the next moment, there was a muffled sound as the violent palm landed on the body of the crimson gold dragon. The dragon's body shook slightly, and large patches of dragon scales fell off. A bloody hole that was over 100 meters wide appeared, and blood dyed the sky red. The entire sky was filled with a heroic aura. Although the crimson golden dragon was injured, it released its draconic aura to protect Mo Rushi and Cher. Nie Tian had absorbed the draconic aura of a 3,000-meter-long golden dragon. Coupled with the power of the supreme dragon bloodline and the dark evil energy in his body, he was able to unleash his full strength and block a palm strike from a pinnacle paramount god. However, his martial body was still too weak, and he couldn't unleash the full power of the golden dragon's draconic aura. A golden dragon at its peak was definitely no weaker than a pinnacle godhood expert. It could definitely withstand an attack from a pinnacle godhood expert. Because of this, Nie Tian was still injured, and his injuries were very serious. Jiang Lai was dumbfounded by the scene in front of him. He was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. How could he have imagined that an inferior deity martial artist's body would contain such terrifying power? The power that Nie Tian had unleashed was beyond everyone's expectations. Dragon Eyes! Hua Jiushan exclaimed in shock as he stared at the crimson golden dragon in the sky. The crimson golden dragon that had appeared in front of everyone wasn't an illusory dragon, but an actual dragon body of flesh and blood. Dragon whiskers, dragon scales, dragon horns, dragon claws, every part of it was made of flesh and blood. This kid is too terrifying. Jiuxian's eyes glazed over as he screamed inwardly. The killing intent in his eyes suddenly became resolute. He could sense the terrifying potential in Nie Tian. Even though he was only a peak lesser god, he could already fight peak paramount gods head-on. It was hard to imagine how powerful he would be once he grew stronger. At this moment, Jiuxian was determined to kill Nie Tian. My Nie Dao's grandson is indeed not simple. Nie Dao laughed wildly when he saw the crimson golden dragon. He was unusually excited. Just from the fact that Nie Tian was able to block Jiang Lai's palm, his potential was already more terrifying than Nie Feng was. Alliance Master Jiang, what are you waiting for? Make your move. Jiuxian let out a sinister and furious roar. Her black body surged like a whirlpool, and a terrifying evil energy of extreme Yin filled the air. His plan was very simple. As long as he stalled Nie Dao, Jiang Lai would have some time to deal with Nie Tian first, and then the two of them could join forces to kill Nie Dao. Although Nie Tian was terrifying, it was still too much for him to fight Jiang Lai. All right. Jiang Lai finally reacted. He let out a low roar, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. His body began to emit a berserk aura, and a huge armored giant formed around him. It was 30 to 40,000 meters tall, and it stood in the air like it was the ruler of this world. The armor of heaven punishing. Jiang Lai was using the Jiang family's heaven punishing bloodline. Jiang Yulong had used the armor of heaven punishing when he fought Nie Feiyu, but Nie Feiyu had defeated it with a single move. But Jiang Lai's armor of heaven punishing was far superior to Jiang Yulong's. Not only was his armor of heaven punishing even larger, but it was even more corporeal. It was already vaguely resembling a true heaven punishing war god. Jiang Lai was actually using the armor of heaven punishing to deal with Nie Tian. What a vicious move. Since he was using the armor of heaven punishing, it meant that he wasn't going to give Nie Tian the slightest chance. Stinking brat, I don't care if you're a human or a dragon, you're going to die today. Jiang Lai bellowed. He took a step forward, causing space to ripple and wind to surge. It was as if heaven and earth were about to collapse. Roar! The crimson gold dragon roared into the sky, its roar resounding through the 9 heavens. Nie Tian knew that he wasn't Jiang Lai's match, but behind him were his wife and unborn child. How could he take half a step back? The 3,000-meter-long divine dragon appeared so tiny in front of the armor of heaven punishing. Boom! The armor of heaven punishing's huge palm descended, blasting wildly at Nie Tian. Waves of violent waves were released, and the heavens and earth wailed. The crimson gold dragon's body tumbled upwards, actually clashing head-on with the armor of heaven punishing. Behind him was his loved one, so he couldn't back down. Bam! With a dull thud, the huge palm landed on the dragon's body. Countless dragon scales fell off, and pieces of flesh and blood were crushed. The entire dragon's body was drenched in blood. Roar! The instant of intense pain made Nie Tian let out a mournful cry. He felt that all the bones in his body were about to shatter, and his entire dragon body was twisted and deformed. The armor of heaven punishing was too terrifying. Even with Nie Tian's dragonized body, he still couldn't block it. Nie Tian. Mo Rushi and Cher saw the tragic scene in midair, and they were already sobbing uncontrollably. Their clear eyes were filled with tears. Nie Feiyu watched from the side, but he couldn't do anything. He only hated himself for being so weak that he couldn't help Nie Tian at all. In the distance, Nie Dao saw the blood-stained dragon, and his expression was sorrowful. However, he was entangled by the 9 gods of calamity, and he couldn't split himself up. Bam! Following that, another palm descended, ruthlessly bombarding the dragon's body. Endless blood gushed out, and the heavens and earth were dyed red. Brat, let's see how long you can last. Jiang Lai's eyes were cold and murderous, and his entire body was filled with killing intent. Nie Tian was too terrifying, and he definitely couldn't be allowed to live. Bam! 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 Following that, a series of muffled sounds rang out, and the crimson gold dragon was completely dyed red with blood. Many of the wounds had already exposed the dragon's bones, and its flesh was a horrifying mess. However, Nye Tian didn't back down at all. Relying on his stubborn conviction, he remained clear-headed. He told himself that he had to hold on. Nye Tian. Nye Dao saw this scene from afar, and he roared in grief and anger. His entire body suddenly released blood qi, and a blood-colored golden light filled the air. He roared violently, "9 gods of calamity, don't stop me!" Seeing Nye Dao suddenly ignite his blood qi, 9 gods of calamity couldn't help but freeze. She immediately understood that Nye Dao was going to fight to the death. 9 gods of calamity only wanted to delay Nye Dao, and didn't want to fight to the death with him. Although she was confident that she could defeat Nye Dao, she would have to pay a heavy price. If she fell into a state of weakness, and Jiang Lai came back to bite her, that would be terrible. The moment she thought of this, 9 gods of calamity struck out with her palm, and then her figure retreated rapidly. At the same time, she shouted, "Nangong, do it!" 9 gods of calamity had already retreated tens of thousands of meters by the time she finished speaking. At the same time, Nangong Duxiu, who had been watching the battle from the sidelines, suddenly sneered and flashed toward Mo Rushi and the others. 9 gods of calamity was too treacherous. On one hand, she let Nye Dao fight Jiang Lai, and on the other hand, she let Nangong Duxiu take action. This was undoubtedly the biggest dilemma for Nye Dao. Should he save Nye Tian, or should he save Mo Rushi? Die! Nangong Duxiu's figure appeared in the blink of an eye, and with a growl, he violently struck out with his palm. An enormous palm descended from the sky toward Mo Rushi and Cher. He was also a peak paramount god, and although he was a bit weaker than 9 gods of calamity and the 2 alliance lords, he wasn't that much weaker.